Chapter 824. Changle's leader, Su Li, had been rather idle lately. After delivering Yanjiao's letter, to avoid being treated as a messenger, Su Li quickly left the royal city after delivering the letter to Ji Fang. He even ran quite a distance away. He wanted to go to the royal city to watch the show, but Yanjiao's team hadn't arrived yet, had they? He'd have to wait for Yanjiao's team to arrive before heading to the royal city. However, other than Yanjiao's trip to the royal city, there was nothing else to be happy about. Hence, Su Li was bored out of his wits. He pondered about where he could find some entertainment. Even if there wasn't, he'd create some. Unexpectedly, before he could even move, he sensed someone heading his way at high speed. Su Li's carefree demeanor was gone as he looked in that direction cautiously. Soon, the wariness in his eyes faded and was replaced by intense suspicion. Not long after, a black figure appeared like the wind. It was Si. "Yo!" Su Li was about to greet an old acquaintance when he saw him. It was the usual greeting, but Si was like a ferocious beast whose tail had been stepped on. He roared, "Yo, your ancestor!" Si didn't stop after his roar. He left like a gust of wind, the air current he stirred up messing up Su Li's unkempt hair. Si's roar left Su Li confused. He wanted to ask jokingly, "Old Si? Where are you going in such a hurry? Are you chasing after a slave?" However, he only managed to utter a single word before Si looked flustered and exasperated. "Angry my a*s?" But Su Li rubbed his chin thoughtfully as he watched Si leave like he was running for his life. Although Si ran very fast, he had good eyesight. He could roughly make out Si's appearance. When Si passed by earlier, he was holding a cross-shaped hilt. Now, it had turned into a vertical pole. If it wasn't for the large she blade with the engravings of an eye, he wouldn't have recognized it as Si's iconic cross-shaped hilt she blade. The hilt of the she blade had been chopped off. Was the leader of the number 1 slave organization in trouble? Who could kill Si? Just as he was thinking, Su Li sensed that someone was coming from behind. He turned around and his expression froze for a few seconds. Then, he suddenly jumped back and looked at Xiao Xian warily. One of his fingers was already curled, ready to whistle and summon his long-winged bird to escape. Nothing good ever came out of running into Yanjiao people. "Why are you here?" Su Li continued. "I'm not here to deliver the letter. I have something to do, so I'll take my leave first." As if he was afraid that Xiao Xian would open his mouth, Su Li called the long-winged bird over, jumped onto its back, and sped away like a mouse meeting a cat. "Xiao Xian! I haven't even said a word." Meanwhile, the fleeing Si was cursing Xiao Xian 1,000 times in his heart. He was crazy. Wasn't it just because he said something wrong and made a move, he was being chased endlessly? When would these days of being on the run end? It was Si's first experience of running from place to place. After the fight that night, Si had temporarily given up on the idea of going head-to-head with the Yanjiao people. Who knew that Xiao Xian would chase after him with no intention of giving up? At first, Si was still thinking about revenge. However, after days of being chased by Xiao Xian, Si changed his mind. He would listen to Ji Fang from now on and stay as far away from Yanjiao as possible. That way, he wouldn't be chased down by the crazy Yanjiao people if he accidentally gave the wrong order. After running from place to place, Si finally chose to go to the royal city to look for Ji Fang to solve this problem. If he had known that messing with the Yanjiao people would end up in such a sorry state, he would never have sent his men to Yanjiao territory to capture him. Royal City, inside the palace. Ji Fang's eyelids twitched. He had a bad feeling about this. After some thought, Ji Fang asked the person beside him, "Judging by the time, Yanjiao should be here soon, right?" "They'll reach the royal city in 3 days, someone whispered beside Ji Fang. Ji Fang thought about the deployment he made after receiving Su Li's letter. After the Yanjiao people arrived, the royal city shouldn't be in trouble. 2 more days passed. The atmosphere in the royal city was exceptionally solemn. Although the royal city's atmosphere had been strange ever since the increase of patrols in the royal city, it was nothing compared to today. It was as if the entire royal city's army was on high alert. The citizens of the royal city had a hunch that something big was about to happen a few days ago. However, after 2 days they saw nothing. Instead, their guesses and discussions intensified. It wasn't that no one said the Yanjiao people were coming, but the reaction of the people of the royal city was different from those of the other cities. What? The Yanjiao people were coming? The Yanjiao person who beat up Lubi and crippled the previous head of the Lu family? He's coming again? Great, great. There's going to be a good show. After the city gate was destroyed, it took a long time to fix it. Who knew what would happen this time? This was the thought of the royal city spectators who lacked entertainment. However, the people in the shops and caravans had a different thought. According to the news, the Yanjiao people were a bunch of idiots with a lot of money. Great. When they arrive, they'll make a fortune out of them. Yanjiao's arrival was the hottest topic in the royal city. There were even rumors that Yanjiao was coming to the royal city to settle down. If that happened, the Lu and Fox families would be in trouble. Because of Yanjiao, the royal city's people didn't even care about the Yi family. As for the large and small families in the royal city, they all had different thoughts. The Lu and Fox families were the leaders. Everyone knew that these two families had conflicts with Yanjiao. The Lin Lu and Fox tribes wanted to stop Shao Xian but were beaten so badly that they couldn't even lift their heads. The royal city's people still remembered the Lu family's head being slapped over the city gate and sent flying over their heads. As for the Fox tribe, they were forced to move into the royal city in the middle of winter. They lacked a bit of confidence and were still unable to gain a foothold in the royal city. No one hated Yanjiao as much as they did. The fall of the Yi family's golden thigh was one disaster after another, causing them to be in an even more difficult situation. That was why when they heard that the flaming horns were coming again, the two families came together to discuss this matter. They even bribed the guards at the city gates and sent many people to guard the city gates. It would be best if they could give the flaming horns a show of strength. They didn't know how many people Yanjiao was coming, but they thought that since they had to cross the sea and travel such a long distance to get to the royal city, there wouldn't be many of them. They would be exhausted and unable to fight. It was the perfect time to strike. This time, they planned to use Yanjiao as a stepping stone to show off their strength. I heard that Yanjiao's people will be here today. Lu Ming's eyes were sinister. He still remembered the humiliation from back then. Even now, the black bears would mock them whenever they saw them. I wonder if Yanjiao's Shao Xian will be coming too. Lubi stood there like a bear. With the hammer in his hand, he cast a huge shadow. Back then, Shao Xian had stolen Lubi's hammer in front of everyone and even chased after him. It was a thorn in Lubi's heart. Now, he was much stronger than before. His talent was incomparable. Even the boss of the Black Bears, Baimi, didn't want to fight Lubi head-on. In a head-on fight, this talented Lu family prodigy had the upper hand. On the city gate tower, a young man in armor looked into the distance. This type of armor was worn by the leaders of the guard. But if one looked closely, they would see that the sword in his hand had a grain leaf pattern on it. It was the Ji family's emblem. Someone walked up and looked at the Lu family below. He asked the young man in armor, "Are you sure you don't want to tell them the truth?" "No need. They'll know soon enough." The young man didn't even spare the Lu family and Fox people a glance. In the courtyard of the Black Bears, the two brothers, Mao Jin and Mao Da, were brushing the fur of the bear pulling the cart. The other was playing with the bear with a stick stained with beast blood. The black bear pulling the carriage roared and chased after the wooden stick with its jaws wide open. Although it looked fierce, it was just playing around. Even when Mauda hit its nose with the wooden stick, it only shrunk its neck and twitched its ears, growling in protest. "Boss, what do you think Yanjiao is here for?" Mao Jin asked. Nearby, Baimi shook his head. I don't know. Do you think Xiao Xian will come? Mao Jin asked again. Probably. As he said that, the black bear that was chasing after the wooden stick paused. The round ears on its head twitched, and it stopped staring at the wooden stick in Mao Da's hand. Instead, it stood up in a direction as if it wanted to see something. However, it was surrounded by walls and houses that were taller than it. It could not see further. What's wrong? Mao Da waved the stick in his hand. The black bear didn't even look at it. Instead, it looked anxious. He exchanged a look with Mao Jin and immediately threw down the stick and brush in his hand. He leaped onto the roof and looked in the direction of Royal City's gate. Awoo! In the distance a wolf howled. Even though it was far away and Royal City was noisy, the sound still reached their ears. Bamy's expression changed. He had been through a lot. He could tell something from the howl. It's coming from outside the gates. Mao Da stood on the roof and craned his neck. He could only see the taller walls on the other side of the gate. There are patrols heading that way, Mao Jin said excitedly. They're here. They must be Yanjiao's men. But what was that howl? Mao Da asked. We'll know when we see. Bamy strode out of the courtyard. Mao Da and Mao Jin hurried after him. It wasn't just the black bears. There was a commotion all over Royal City. The wolf howl that came from outside the city made many people who were chatting in the city quiet down for a while. Then, there was an even louder discussion. Many curious people who liked to watch the show decisively put down what they were doing and rushed to the city gate. The Yi family. Those who had been protected by Yi Tuan during the battle with Yi Xiang, and those who had survived the chaos to protect the Yi family all paled. He's here. He's here again. Chapter 825. Gigu looked at the royal city in front of him, deep in thought. The royal city, as expected of the royal city. It was like an ancient giant beast lying there. Even if it didn't make a sound, one could still feel its powerful and majestic aura. It was as if it would swallow everyone and everything that came here in the next moment. There was a sense of urgency in the air that suppressed everything. Those who came here for the first time couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. Because of the slave masters and Zheng Luo's description, Gigu had never liked the people here, especially those from the royal city. He hated them, but he had to admit that the royal city was indeed huge. It was not comparable to the cities they passed by on their way here. There was always a reason to be strong. Logically speaking, as the leader of a tribe, Gigu had to learn from this experience. This is the royal city. There were many people who had the same thought as Gigu. Many of them thought that the Flaming River trading point was already big enough. It was beyond their imagination. It was the biggest trading point they had ever seen in their lives. But now they realized that they did not know how big the world was until they came here. Gigu finally understood why Xiao Xian asked them to come to the royal city. If they didn't come here, many of the Yanjiao people who were already full of themselves would not recognize reality. It was better to let them see it for themselves. Most of the people who came this time were born and raised on the other side of the continent. There was still a gap between them and Zheng Luo's group. They had learned a lot from this trip. Yanjiao was moving too fast. Many people's ambitions could not keep up with their willpower. After they woke up, they still had a long way to go. Can our Flaming River trading point reach this scale in the future? Ao asked. Our Grand Elder said we can, Tua said confidently. The trading point was in the process of expansion. As the Flaming River Alliance continued to expand, the trading point would continue to expand. Although they also wanted to expand to the size of King City in one go, overestimating themselves would create a feeling of exaggeration. It was better to be solid and steady. The shamans had all said that military force, population, and the will of the people were all things that had to be considered. Even if he could not see that day, he believed that the day of Yanjiao would come. Gigu smirked. That's good. I think so too. With that said, he raised his arm and swung it down. Crackle, in front of the royal city, on the open plains, 6 totem flags were carried forward in a row, fluttering in the wind. Why 6 totem flags? Back then, there were only 3 flags in Chao Chiu Ching. Yanjiao's double-horn totem flag, the Flaming River Alliance's dragon flag, and the Longboat tribe's totem flag. But this time, on the way to the royal city, the Hui tribe, Mang tribe, and 8 Limbs tribe had gathered together and thought about it. No matter how they thought about it, they felt that they had lost out. Although not many of their tribes came this time, this was a good opportunity to use Yanjiao's power to make their presence known. It would be a pity to give it up. However, the totem flag was not something that could be easily made. In the end, they thought of a compromise. They would not draw the totem flag in the name of their tribe, but in the name of a small group of people. There would be a difference in the production of the totem flag, but the slave masters and tribesmen here did not understand the rules of the tribes on the other side of the sea. As long as they let others see the totem flag, they would know that people from this tribe had come here before. It would not be in vain for them to come here with the flaming horns. Ta held the Yanjiao totem flag and poked the flagpole into the ground. With a bang, a large amount of dust and grass flew up from the ground. He let go of the flag, and the totem flag quietly stood on the ground. Stretching his arms, Ta and Ao silently communicated with each other. As a team leader who led hunting teams into the forest all year round, Ta could clearly feel the hostility from the city gate. It would not be easy for them to enter the city gate of King City. Was he afraid? Of course not. After stretching his arms, Ta grabbed the flagpole again and pulled it out from the ground. The sound of the totem flag hitting the ground had also brought everyone back to their senses from the shock of seeing King City. However, at this moment, when they saw the totem flag fluttering in the wind, they no longer had any fear in their hearts. Was the royal city scarier than the fearsome beast forest? They were not afraid of the fearsome beast forest, so what was there to be afraid of in the royal city? Plus, they all believed that one day, the Flaming River trading point would surpass the royal city. Wherever the 2 horns pointed, they would succeed. Perhaps it was because of the change in the Yanjiao people's mentality and morale. The other tribesmen also gradually adjusted their mentality. Indeed, what was there to be afraid of? Plus, if anything happened, the Yanjiao people would take the lead. The horn from the city gate sounded after a long howl. The people at the city gate had already begun to move. The royal city guard's armor glowed with a golden light. Seeing this, many people followed their leaders forward while stretching their arms and legs. The swords, axes, and hammers in their hands seemed to be thirsty for blood. Some people even roared excitedly as they moved forward. Looking at their posture, those who didn't know better would think that they were really going to attack the city. Actually, it wasn't just the tribesmen who were shocked by the royal city. The royal city guards were also shocked by these people. Looking at the approaching group, they couldn't help but feel a layer of goosebump. Even though there were many people in this group who might not be as strong as them in terms of martial prowess, at this moment, in this place, these people seemed to have twisted together into an aura that could sweep away 1,000 soldiers in an instant. On this continent, perhaps only a trained army or a few tribes that lived far away in the mountains could achieve such a feat. This was the advantage of these tribesmen who had just merged with their fire seed. They were united, and the influence of their fire seed was still present. Among the guards at the city gate, Luming looked at the approaching group and gulped. So many people? And where were the others from? Didn't they say only Yanjiao? Why were there so many flags with totems? If they didn't borrow the power of the royal city, with just the Lu family and the Fox people, even if they could win, it would not be easy. The Lu family was still hesitating, but the Fox people were already thinking of retreating. Even though the Yanjiao tribesmen only knew Shaoxian, they were familiar with Yanjiao's fire seed aura and style. That was why when they saw the numbers, the cunning Fox tribesmen did not want to fight head-on. The Lu family should be the one to deal with the Flaming Horn tribe. It was a difficult task. The armored youth on the city gate tower looked at the approaching group and hesitated. He did not go down to greet them. It wasn't that he didn't dare, he just wanted to observe the situation first. Remembering his brother Jifeng's words, the armored youth searched the approaching group but did not find the person he was looking for. Where was Yanjiao's Xiaoxian? They said they were here to negotiate with Yanjiao. The most important person was Yanjiao's Xiaoxian. If not for Xiaoxian, Jifeng would not be so afraid of Yanjiao. Just as he was thinking, the cry of an eagle came from the sky. It was not the ones in the sky, but an eagle flying from another direction. It swooped down towards the group heading for the city gate. A figure jumped down from the eagle's back and landed at the front of the group. The armored youth on the city gate tower noticed that when that person appeared, the troops heading towards King City fell silent. Even the roars stopped at the same time. The leaders also looked at that person, as if they were waiting for something. "That's Yanjiao's Xiaoxian?" the armored youth asked. "That's him," someone beside the armored youth replied in a low voice. Xiaoxian's appearance lessened the pressure on Gigu and the others. Scanning the group, Xiaoxian looked at the city gate not far away and gestured for them to stop. It was not just the Yanjiao people. The other tribes, including the Long Boat and the Mang tribe, stopped as well. None of them objected, and there was no dissatisfaction on their faces. This was not an act. This discovery made the armored youth squint his eyes. He looked at Xiaoxian and pondered. Xiaoxian scanned the royal city gate, and his eyes stopped on Lubi. Although Yanjiao's group exceeded their expectations, Lubi did not care. His target was Xiaoxian, who had just appeared. His eyes were filled with hatred as he stared at Xiaoxian. The muscles on his face were twisted together, making him look ferocious. That day, it was Xiaoxian who stole his hammer in front of everyone and chased after him to beat him up. He was a famous genius of the Lu family in the royal city. Today, he came with a vengeance. No matter what other people thought, Lubi's goal was clear. Revenge. Xiaoxian naturally noticed the intense stares. He did not say anything and walked straight towards Lubi and the others. There was no roar, no release of aura, and no change in the ground beneath his feet. Every step he took brought up a small amount of dust particles. This did not seem like an extremely dangerous ferocious beast approaching, but more like an ordinary person walking on the ground. However, Lubi, who was facing Xiaoxian, felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on him. He wanted to roar, to release all his strength, to avenge his humiliation. However, he helplessly realized that it was useless. He was like a torch that was about to burn, but the air around him was suddenly sealed. He had nowhere to release his aura, so he had no choice but to hold it back. Lubi, who was standing there with his hammer that could shield him from the sun and rain, had his fierce aura suppressed. He wanted to activate the fire seed's power in his blood, but he realized that the power seemed to be on strike. It was as if it was purposely avoiding something, unwilling to move. "You? How is this possible?" Lubi's eyes were filled with disbelief. The hammer in his hand was even bigger than the one Xiaoxian took from the Gongjia family. However, it was only in Lubi's hand now. Lubi's arm trembled, causing the hammer to vibrate weakly. So what if he could not swing the hammer? Many people did not understand why Lubi was behaving like this. Wasn't he the one who wanted to teach Yanjiao Xiaoxian a lesson a few days ago? Why was Xiaoxian standing right in front of him and Lubi could not even swing the hammer? No one knew how Lubi felt. His scalp was about to explode. His back was drenched in sweat and he was terrified. He even wanted to run away. He saw a ball of fire in Xiaoxian's eyes. A ball of white fire. Chapter 8:26. Lubi's tall and sturdy body trembled. His eyes could no longer hide the panic, shock, and fear in them. He wanted to avoid Xiaoxian's gaze, but his legs refused to listen to him. Lubi even thought that if he forced himself to move, he would lose his balance and fall. He didn't need to think too much to know what would happen to him if he fell in front of these tribesmen from the distant continent. Weighing the pros and cons, Luby chose to grit his teeth and stay put. Noticing Luby's unusual behavior, the other Lu family members wanted to get closer to see what was going on. However, as soon as they moved, Xiao Xian's gaze fell on them. It was as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over their heads. The Lu family felt their hair stand on end as they met Xiao Xian's gaze. The slightest movement would cause them to shiver. Even though many of them were still far away from Xiao Xian, they could feel an inexplicable shudder that seemed to come from their bones. Or rather, it was a problem with the source of their strength. What was going on? The man on the tower had been watching the commotion below. He could tell that something was wrong. If he continued to watch, the Lu family would be humiliated. Although he did not like the Lu family's style, they were now the guards of the royal city. If they were humiliated, it would be humiliating for the royal city. Especially in front of these tribesmen, he could not afford to mess things up. He thought the Lu family would at least hold on for a little longer. What a pity! Sighing silently, the armored youth jumped down from the tower and landed behind Luby. Xiao Xian looked over, unsurprised by his appearance. Ji family? Xiao Xian could feel the aura of the Ji family from him. This person looked similar to Ji Fang, but compared to Ji Fang's calmness, this person was more arrogant. However, in front of Xiao Xian, the arrogance on his face lessened, and his eyes became more cautious. Ji Shou of the Ji family is here to welcome you, said Ji Shou. He was the leader of the royal city's guards and one of the few surviving Ji Fang's ascension to the throne. Ji Shou was Ji Fang's biological brother and had contributed greatly to Ji Fang's ascension. As Ji Shou spoke, he met Xiao Xian's eyes and paused. He finally understood why the Lu family members were acting like this. They were under immense pressure. What Ji Shou did not know was that Xiao Xian had restrained himself after Ji Shou's appearance. Due to Ji Fang's appearance, Xiao Xian looked away. The Lu family, including Luby, felt their bodies lighten as if a mountain had been lifted from their shoulders. Some of them wiped the cold sweat off their foreheads, secretly relieved that Ji Shou had appeared in time or they wouldn't have been able to hold on. These Yanjiao people were really strange. Ji Shou was different from the rest of the Lu family. The power of the fire seed in his body was stronger. After a short pause, he recovered. In the primitive times, the Ji family's fire seed would have been stronger than the Lu family's. Ji Shou could resist Xiao Xian's pressure. They had been stuck at the city gates for a long time. Ji Shou did not waste time and gestured for Xiao Xian to enter. "Open the gates," Ji Shou said. "Everyone, please." Xiao Xian stepped into the city first. Gigu followed behind him with the group. Ji Shou watched the group pass and narrowed his eyes, trying his best to hide the sharpness in them. These tribesmen were indeed different from what he had expected. The results of the Lu family's test meant that he had to treat them seriously. It was rare for him to say please. After all the flaming horns had entered the city, Ji Shou looked at the stunned Lu family with disdain, then at the fox people who were hiding far away. He chuckled and hurried into the city, not caring about the Lu family and the fox people's reactions. The city gates were no longer closed after the Yanjiao group entered the city. Traffic in and out of the royal city resumed. But the Lu family did not have it easy. Thinking of the situation at that time, their hearts were filled with lingering fear, and a chill ran down their spines. Luby watched in a daze as the group walked away. His grip loosened and the hammer fell to the ground with a thud. Luby seemed to have completely collapsed as he struggled to support his body. Lu Ming, who was not far from Luby, fell to his knees with a thud. They understood Ji Shou's gaze and smile when he left. They were finished. On the other side, the group that had followed Xiao Xian into the royal city walked along the wide road that led directly to the palace. They looked curiously at the royal city troops who were maintaining order on both sides. At the same time, they studied the onlookers, the buildings, and the furnishings of the shops around them. The roads in the royal city were much wider than those in Chaoqiu City. Caesar and his group did not find it crowded at all. Large beasts often walked around the royal city. However, this road was not open to just anyone. Travelers and caravans usually took other routes into the city. Those who walked on this road were given special treatment. "Can you tell?" Gui he asked Tua, who was beside him. "What?" Tua was observing the situation in King City when Gui he suddenly asked such a question. He did not know how to react. The reaction of the people in King City is different from the reaction of the people in the other cities we have seen, Gui he said. Tua thought for a moment. Indeed, the people in the royal city seemed to be looking for entertainment. They were like monkeys in the crowd, watching the Yanjiao group with interest. They were not as guarded as the people in Chaoqiu City. Back then, only a few hundred people had entered Chaoqiu City. Now, all of them had entered the royal city. Even though there were many Yanjiao people, some of the royal city people were shocked at first sight. But they quickly returned to watching the fun. Why? This was the royal city's confidence. This was the royal city's confidence and power. Those who could stay in the royal city were all capable. The fox tribe had been arrogant in the forest back in the day. Even though the tribe had suffered great losses from the king beast incident at the salt mine, at least there were still people in the tribe. Together, they were a powerful force. However, in the royal city, they could not do much. All they could do was suppress the free people or small organizations. The only reason they could be so arrogant until now was because they were riding on the coattails of the Yi family. Once the Yi family fell, the people who had been suppressed by the fox tribe would take revenge. The free people and small organizations in the royal city had nothing to fear. They were not afraid of the Yanjiao group. Plus, even if the Yi family had fallen, there were still the other 5 aristocratic families. What were they afraid of? As the Yanjiao group made their way to the palace, an uninvited guest arrived at the Gongjia residence. "Tell Gongjia Heng to come out." A man dressed in black stood in the great hall, exuding a murderous aura. The current leader of the Gongjia family was Gongjia Heng. Ever since Ji Feng took over, Gongjia Heng's status in the family had skyrocketed. Plus, Gongjia Heng was capable and had just returned from his studies at Gongjia Mountain. After comparing the craftsman's products, the elders of the Gongjia family had acknowledged Gongjia Heng's position. At the same time, this was the best choice for the Gongjia family. Gongjia Heng had been in closed-door cultivation recently. Unless there was an emergency, no one would disturb him. This was not just Gongjia Heng's rule, it was a habit of all the Gongjia family's craftsmen and craftsmen. No one wanted to be disturbed by a trivial matter during their craftsman's work. When it came to crafting, a life-changing inspiration could vanish like smoke in the wind. They might not be able to recall it for the rest of their lives. At this moment, the Gongjia family had an uninvited guest. This was someone the Gongjia family did not want to welcome but did not dare offend. "Where's Gongjia Heng? Tell him to come out right now." Another suppressed roar caused everyone in the room to tremble. They were afraid, but because of their profession, they couldn't help but glance at the other party's weapon. Those who knew where the weapon came from felt their hearts skip a beat. How did the cross-shaped handle end up like this? The fracture looked strange. If they did not look closely, they would not be able to tell. They were curious, but they did not want to get involved. The person standing in the Gongjia family's great hall was Si, who had been chased all the way here by Xiao Xian. However, Si had changed into a new set of clothes, so he did not look as pathetic. There were not many people who dared to disrespect the Gongjia family like this, and this person was one of them. The Gongjia family and Si had been working together since the Gongjia family's ancestors. Every year, the Gongjia family needed rare materials. Part of it was from this man. After all, Ji had nothing but slaves. He had enough manpower to mine and search for things. Xi's cross-shaped shi knife was made by the Gongjiao family's craftsman. However, the senior who made it had passed away a long time ago. The craftsman might not be able to replicate the craftsmanship and techniques used. It would be difficult to repair it. The more skilled the Gongjiao family's craftsmen were, the more serious their OCD was. If they could not repair the knife perfectly, they would rather not do it. Otherwise, not only would their reputation be damaged, they would also be unhappy for a long time. Xi had interacted with many Gongjiao family members and knew how they were like. That was why he went straight to Gongjiao Heng to ask for an explanation. He knew that some of the Gongjiao family members had left after Ji Fang took over. He was here to ask if his cross-shaped shi knife could be repaired. If it continued like this, he would lose face. To avoid people, he snuck into the royal city and went to Ji Fang's place before heading straight to the Gongjiao family. His other goal was to find out who in the Gongjiao family was the one who forged those threatening weapons for the Flaming Horn tribe. "Where's Heng? Get him out here!" Xi roared impatiently. "What are you yelling for?" Heng was not without a temper after being interrupted in the middle of his work. However, the moment he entered, he saw the shi knife in Xi's hand. His eyes were glued to it. "Your knife, let me see." Chapter 8:27. Seeing that Heng had finally come out, Xi did not waste any time. He tossed the shi blade he had shaved into a stick at Heng. The shi blade was still quite heavy. Although it had been shaved, it was still heavy for a regular person. However, as a blacksmith, Heng's arm strength was incomparable to a regular person's. After catching the shi blade firmly, he did not even look at Xi as he studied it carefully. The other Gongjiao family members did not care anymore. They all gathered around to study the shi blade's fracture. The people who were still in the hall were all people of some status in the family. They were Heng's trusted aides, so Xi was not afraid of them spreading rumors. He allowed them to study it. This fracture. Heng rubbed his finger back and forth, carefully feeling the surface of the fracture. His eyes did not miss a single detail. To be able to create such a fracture, the other party's weapon must be very sharp and hard. The force of the blow must have been very strong too. Most importantly, he did not know what material it was made of. From the fracture, Heng could tell that the weapon used to break the handle was not a material he was familiar with. This piqued Heng's curiosity. He asked Xi, "Tell me about what happened." Xi refused to recall what happened. He would not describe how Xiao Xian had shaved him to the Gongjiao family. He could not wait to hide this embarrassing incident. How could he tell anyone? "It's fine if you don't want to talk. Tell me what the weapon looks like." Heng thought back to all the weapons he had encountered. None of them could create a fracture like this. The marks on it were very unfamiliar. "You don't know?" Xi glanced at Heng and the other blacksmiths with a strange expression. He really could not describe what Xiao Xian's blade looked like. "It's a blade. I didn't notice it at the time, but I know it has the Gongjiao family's cloud pattern on it. There's no mistaking it." Among the Gongjiao family members who left, who went to Yanjiao. "Yanjiao? The one who broke the shi blade was Xiao Xian from Yanjiao?" asked Heng. "Yes, you know Xiao Xian? Right, I heard that Xiao Xian from Yanjiao once came to Royal City and asked you to make him a sword. Did you make that kid's sword too?" Xi raised his voice, glaring at Heng as if he wanted to eat him alive. Gongjia Heng did not mind Xi's fierce glare. He frowned and shook his head. "No, although I've given Yanjiao some swords and axes, only the sword I gave to Xiao Xian is the best. The rest can't even cut through the hilt of your shi sword. Those swords and axes aside, even the sword I gave to Xiao Xian might not be able to make such a cut." "Then who in the Gongjiao family made Yanjiao's sword?" Xi was in a bad mood. Could it be? An older man next to him hesitated. "Gongjiaren." When Ji Fang took the throne, a portion of the Gongjiao family members left, including Gongjiaren. Others did not know where Gong Jiaren went, but Heng's trusted aides knew. Gong Jiaren and a few others were sent to Yanjiao for protection. Heng naturally thought of that too, but thought it was impossible. How long had it been since Gong Jiaren left? Plus, Gong Jiaren had never been to Xia Valley to receive his ancestors' inheritance. Even if Gong Jiaren was talented, there were many talented people in the Gongjia family. So how did Gong Jiaren make these weapons? Just as the Gongjia family members were guessing who made Xiao Xian's sword, Yanjiao's team arrived at the palace. Of course, not everyone entered the palace. Xiao Xian led 200 people into the palace while the rest stayed outside. Ji Fang had already arranged a place for everyone to stay. The last time Xiao Xian saw Ji Fang, he was still the second son of the king and kept a low profile. Now that they met again, Ji Fang exuded a noble aura. Although Ji Fang did not go to the city gates to welcome them, he sent his younger brother and himself to the palace gates to welcome them as a sign of respect. Long time no see. Ji Fang had a smile on his face. His clothes were luxurious with exquisite embroidery, and he exuded an indescribable aura of nobility. His every move exuded the authority of a superior. Xiao Xian's aura was clearly different from Ji Fang's. Although he did not exude a noble aura like Ji Fang's, he had a Yanjiao aura. Those who could follow Xiao Xian into the palace were the leaders and elites of the Flaming River tribes. No matter what they thought or how nervous they were, they could not appear weak in front of these noble slave masters. Ji Fang had already ordered his men to prepare a feast, but it was still early at night. Ji Fang did not give Xiao Xian time to ask about Si. He immediately ordered his men to bring all the missing people from the Flaming River Valley here. Ji Fang was not lying. No matter how they were tortured, they were treated well in the royal city. At least they were brought to Xiao Xian and the rest in high spirits. Ji Fang was about to tell them about the special treatment the slaves received in the royal city when his gaze swept past them. He paused, forgetting what he was about to say. He saw a person, and that person should not have appeared among those who were captured. He had never seen this person before. Ji Fang's expression darkened. Although he wanted to grab the guards in charge of the captured tribesmen, it was bad enough that Robber 7 was here, but now there was a tribesman among them and no one knew. But now was not a good time to be lecturing. Ji Fang could only suppress his anger and his expression was ugly. The guard wanted to explain, but when he met Ji Fang's gaze, he could only lower his head. Gigu ordered Chu Li and the rest to bring the captured tribesmen back to their teams to check if there were any missing people. When he saw Gan Xie walk out with the captured people, he was stunned. When he saw that Xiao Xian did not look surprised, he knew that Xiao Xian must have asked Gan Xie to check on the captured people. After checking on the captured people, there were no missing people and no life-threatening injuries. Chu Li and the rest relaxed. He could go back and report to his tribesmen. This risky trip was not in vain. Let's talk about the contract. How do we sign it? Asked Xiao Xian. Ji Fang did not expect Xiao Xian to not mention Si. When he heard the haggard Si's words, he deduced that Xiao Xian must have known that he was working with Si. He thought that Xiao Xian would question him after bringing his men over, or even use this as an opportunity to ask for more conditions. Who would have thought that Xiao Xian would skip over Si and ask about the contract? Since Xiao Xian did not mention it, Ji Fang would not bring it up either. There are many ways to sign a contract, but we usually choose two. One is a spiritual contract and the other is a written contract. Both are based on the fire seed. Ji Fang explained the difference between the two contracts to Xiao Xian. A written contract was to record the contents of the contract in words and then use the power of the fire seed to draw a totem mark to prove the signer's identity. However, a written contract was not that strong. Some people would disregard their reputation and go back on their word. There was nothing you could do about it. No matter how much you scolded them, they would not lose anything. However, a spiritual contract was different. A spiritual contract requires a mark on the heaven and earth contract book. Ji Fang looked at the center of the palace. It was not a place anyone could enter. Heaven and earth contract book? That's right. The heaven and earth contract book is connected to the fire seed. It cannot be changed easily, even if you are the king. The smile on Ji Fang's face was replaced by a solemn expression. When the heaven and earth contract book was mentioned, everyone would be in awe, including himself. If you choose the heaven and earth contract book, I will bring you there. If you choose the written contract, we can start discussing the contents now, said Ji Fang. Heaven and earth contract book. Xiao Xian looked at the center of the palace. I choose the heaven and earth contract book. Gigu and the rest had no objections to Xiao Xian's choice. They could tell that the only person Ji Fang valued was Xiao Xian. Coincidentally, they followed Xiao Xian's decision. News of Yanjiao choosing the heaven and earth contract book soon spread outside the palace. What? Those tribesmen chose the heaven and earth contract book? Heaven and earth contract book? Did I hear wrong? Really? Definitely it came from the nobles. The royal city's spectators exploded. Yanjiao's tribesmen had chosen the heaven and earth contract book method. Most of them had never seen what a heaven and earth contract book looked like. Other than the nobles in the royal city, only the leaders of large caravans and tribes had seen it. Although the passers-by had not seen it with their own eyes, they had heard of it. Place your bets. Place your bets. The gambling house was the first to react. They started shouting and putting up a large sign. Someone beat a drum to attract attention. Everyone, guess how big of a mark Yanjiao will leave on the heaven and earth contract book? Why don't you come in and place your bets? Whoosh! The royal city's spectators, who were curious and eager to watch the show, were now itching for a bet. The older people knew how the heaven and earth contract book was bet, but the younger people did not know why and fought to ask. The gambling house's people looked pleased. They enjoyed the feeling of being surrounded by people, and also enjoyed the requests of the ignorant people. Moreover, the more people there were, the more they earned. The person beating the drum stopped and cleared his throat. He was about to explain in detail to these ignorant juniors. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to open his mouth, someone suddenly jumped out and slammed something on the table in front of him. Bet a crystal. The gambling house's people's eyes flashed coldly. They looked across the table at the person who interrupted them. However, before they could take a closer look, their eyes were attracted by the thing on the table. A crystal as thick as an arm was slammed on the table, pressing down on the spot where the words, Yanjiao, were written in red. The crowd instantly fell silent. Then, they all looked at the person who pressed down on the big crystal, as if they were looking at an idiot. Chapter 828. Because of the core seed, gemstones were extremely rare here. That was why the people here, whether they were nobles, slave masters, or tribesmen who lived far away from the city, loved gemstones very much. The rarer something was, the more precious it was. The better the quality of life, the more people who didn't have to worry about food and clothing, the more they liked beautiful and rare gemstones. A long time ago, there were no gambling houses in the royal city. The so-called gambling houses were just games for some bored people to pass the time. Occasionally they would place bets because of some fight. Later, there were more and more organizations. Some of them saw the business opportunities in gambling and joined forces to set up gambling houses. Their purpose was not to pass the time, but to make a profit. The gambling house in the royal city was the largest in the city. It was called Fu Bo. Fu Bo was probably the most famous gambling house on the mainland. After all, it was based in the royal city. Although other gambling houses had some scale, because they were set up later than Fu Bo, they were not as famous as Fu Bo. In terms of strength, there was also a gap. Many gambling houses that were gradually rising wanted to enter the royal city. After all, the royal city was the richest place on the mainland. If a gambling house was set up in the royal city, the profits would definitely be huge. However, because of Fu Bo, they were unable to establish themselves in the royal city. Ever since Fu Bo was set up, they would set up gambling houses every day. There were various kinds of gambling houses. Through various forms of winning and losing, they attracted gamblers and accumulated wealth. If it was a large-scale gambling house, someone would inform them. People from all over the royal city would hear about it and come over. This time it was like that. The sound of the drums told the people in the city that there was a big event and they could start gambling. However, even if they were mentally prepared, no one would have thought that this would happen. Therefore, when this crystal as thick as an arm was thrown out, some people's eyes widened. This was too ruthless. Such a big crystal, how precious was it? Just like that, it was thrown on the gambling table. Wouldn't it be heartbreaking to lose it? If it were them, they would be heartbroken for half their lives. Usually, they would gamble just to pass the time and use a little money to play. Everyone had different goals. Some people were really bored and wanted to pass the time. Some were just following the trend to join in the fun. There were also some who wanted to inquire about some information or get familiar with others through gambling. Of course, there were also some people who were addicted to gambling and would take out more money. The people in the gambling house had also seen some noble children throw away a lot of money, betting with precious things and so on. However, they had never seen such a large crystal. The sunlight was refracted into 7 colors by this pure and translucent crystal. When it shone on the table, some people almost forgot to breathe. This, not to mention the onlookers, even Fu Bo's people were dumbfounded at this time. Some people wanted to touch the crystal, but their fingers were trembling, afraid that they would accidentally destroy it. Abuli, how can you place? The drumming and Pu tribesmen came up from behind. People from other tribes also heard the commotion and came over. They did not follow Xiao Xian into the palace this time. Most of the people who entered the palace were Yanjiao people and the tribes who had lost a lot of people. These people who were placed outside the palace had nothing to do anyway, so they decided to go around the royal city to broaden their horizons. They also wanted to see if there were any souvenirs. If they liked something, they would buy it. It was rare for them to come here. They had just started walking around when they heard about the gambling house. There were often gambling houses in the Flaming River trading point, so they had seen them before. There were pictures drawn on the gambling table, and one of them was Yan Jiao's 2-horned totem. Before they could ask, Abuli rushed over. Ever since he came here, Abuli had become a tycoon. The feeling of being able to buy a lot of things with a wave of his hand was amazing. Because he had the support of the other tribes in the Flaming River Alliance, Abuli began to flaunt his wealth. Abuli was just flaunting his wealth too much, so he slapped the table in excitement. Now that everyone looked at him like he was an idiot, he came back to his senses. This was not the Flaming River trading point. The rules were different and the way of playing might be different too. He didn't even know what the Heaven and Earth Agreement book was. After he woke up, Abuli regretted it immediately. He had been too complacent this time and had lost his composure as the chief of a tribe. "What's the Heaven and Earth contract?" a Longboat tribe member asked. At this time, the people in the gambling house did not mind that they did not know anything. It was easier to scam them if they didn't know anything. The Heaven and Earth contract is a way to sign a contract. Tribes who sign a contract with the royal city will leave their mark on the Heaven and Earth contract. Different people can leave different marks on the Heaven and Earth contract too. Do you see these on the table? These are the rankings of the 6 noble families of the royal city based on the size of their marks on the Heaven and Earth contract. This was also the original ranking of the 6 noble families in the royal city. The people in the gambling house did not say the second half of the sentence because this was only the ranking of the 6 noble families of the royal city in the past. Now many things had changed. For example, the E family, who was ranked second in terms of the size of their marks on the heaven and earth contract, was now half crippled. To put it simply, the stronger the person, the bigger the mark they can leave on the heaven and earth contract. The explanation was simple and easy to understand. Abueli looked at the 7 big sections on the table and understood a little. The people in the gambling house continued to explain to them how the game was played. They divided the table into 7 sections. The 6 noble families of the royal city, Ji, Mu, Feng, Chao, and An, had their surnames written. There was an empty section behind each section. Other than these 6 sections, there was another empty section at the side with Yanjiao written on it. Every empty section was a place to place a bet. The gambler would bet on whichever section they thought that Yanjiao could leave more marks than them. If they could not leave more marks than any of them, they would bet on the last section. If they could leave more marks than all of them, they would bet on another section with Yanjiao written on it. The section that Abueli had bet on earlier meant that he had bet on Yanjiao surpassing the 6 noble families of the royal city. That section was a section that no gambler in the royal city would bet on. This was also why everyone looked at Abueli as if he was an idiot. There was actually someone who thought that Yanjiao could surpass the royal Ji family? This was the funniest joke they had seen all day. To be precise, the size of the mark on the heaven and earth contract was not directly related to one's strength. However, until now, there had never been a case where the mark on the heaven and earth contract exceeded that of the Ji family. In fact, there had never been a case where the mark on the heaven and earth contract exceeded that of the E family. The people in the gambling house were explaining things a little too quickly. Abueli could not understand everything, but the results of his cramming along the way allowed him to get a rough idea of what was going on. So you don't know the rules. Why don't you place a new bet? Someone from the royal city advised. It was not that they were kindly reminding him, but they wanted to see the disappointed faces of the people in the gambling house. If that large crystal had been placed in the empty section, then it would have belonged to the gambling house and could not be taken back. How could they win something that was impossible? Yeah, let's place a new bet. I think we should bet on the Chao family. I think it's better to bet on the An family. Don't you remember how Yanjiao sent the head of the Lu family flying with one slap? I think it's better to bet on the Feng family. Who knows, maybe Yanjiao can surpass the Chao family and the An family. Those who wanted to watch the show started to jeer. The faces of the people in the gambling house alternated between green and white. They were so angry that their veins were throbbing. They wanted nothing more than to shut these people up. What's going on? A low voice rang out from the gambling house. It was not loud, but it seemed to suppress all the jeering. The crowd fell silent again. Abueli looked over and saw a middle-aged man with a long beard walking out of the gambling house. Even the silk robe he was wearing could not hide his ferocious aura. There was a large scar on one side of his face. However, the scar on the other side of his face was painted with the face of a ferocious beast, making him look even more eerie. The person who hit the drum saw this and was slightly taken aback. He stepped back and made way for the middle-aged man. "Boss, it's like this." Someone from the gambling house came over to explain the situation. The middle-aged man looked at the crystal on the gambling table. His eyes flashed. After all, he was the leader. Although he was excited, he maintained a steady and calm expression. He walked to the gambling table and sized up Abueli's group. He said, "I am Bo Yi, the leader of Fu Bo. They have already explained the rules of the Heaven and Earth Contract book bet." Abueli looked at Bo Yi's long beard that parted when he spoke. He did not pay attention to what the other party was saying and let out a confused, "Ah." Foolish people are easy to trick. This was Bo Yi's first impression of Abueli. Without waiting for Abueli to speak, Bo Yi continued, "How about this? You all came from afar, so it's understandable that you don't know the rules here. Even some of the young people in the royal city might not know how to bet on the heaven and earth contract. You should all understand now, right? How about we place a new bet? He purposely spoke slowly and loudly, but every word was emphasized clearly. Everyone present could hear him clearly. Boss! The people beside him wanted to persuade him, but Bo-e raised his hand to stop them. Bo-e did not look at the people in the gambling house who were scratching their heads. His eyes were fixed on Abuli's group. How do you choose? Or do you choose to believe in Yanjiao? He purposely changed the topic. Believing in Yanjiao did not necessarily mean that Yanjiao would surpass the 6 tribes of the royal city. It did not mean that they had to keep their wealth. But at a time like this, how would these unfamiliar tribesmen choose? Of course we choose to believe in Yanjiao. Abuli had no intention of taking back the crystal. Bo-yi's lips curled. Just as he expected. They were going to get this crystal. Bo-yi looked away from Abuli and turned to the people around him. Do you all want to play too? The drumming tribes Qing-yi and the Pu tribes you looked at each other. They both took out the water moonstones that they originally planned to buy, and they even took out bags of them. Like Abuli, I'll bet on Yanjiao. Jue threw out his bag. Bam! A bag of water moonstones was thrown at the spot with Yanjiao written on it. The bag was wide open, allowing everyone to see the stones inside. Because there were already people coming and going between the 2 continents, the longboat tribe sold some water moonstones here at a high price. As people from the royal city, they had seen water moonstones before. Plus, the people of the royal city thought water moonstones were more valuable than crystals. They had never seen so many at once. There were at least 20 pieces in this bag, right? Bo-yi's fingers trembled. He covered the top of the bag with his arm. Even though he only blocked a small part of the light, they could still see the light from the water moonstones. These were high-quality water moonstones, not those low-quality ones that gave off a dim light and had impurities. Bo-yi's heart raced. Hiss, someone in the crowd gasped. Another big spender. Me too, Qingyi said. Bam! An even bigger bag of water moonstones was thrown at the spot with Yanjiao written on it. Bo-yi inspected the goods. This bag of water moonstones was of a higher quality than the previous one. Oh, the crowd cheered even louder. Bo-gu of the Gu tribe did not say a word. He opened his animal skin bag and placed the bag of ground eye stones there. A few high-quality ground eye stones rolled out of the bag. Under the light from Yang Guang, they looked like the eyes of a beast staring at the crowd. Looking at them from different angles, it felt like the beast's eyes were moving. Wow, the crowd cheered even louder. They were all big spenders. The other tribesmen from the longboat tribe didn't stay idle either. They all took out their belongings and placed them in the same spot. Bags of jades, crystals, and magnificent gems dazzled the people around the gambling house. Their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Their shouts grew louder and louder, and the people in the back were numb. However, the shouts did not die down, and the excitement of the crowd did not diminish at all. Instead, the shouts became louder as more and more onlookers joined in. It seemed that only by shouting could they vent their excitement. Gulp! Someone swallowed his saliva, and more people around him followed suit. Some of them even wiped the saliva that flowed out. They could not be blamed for their reactions. Even though they were born in the capital or often came to the capital for trade and claimed to be knowledgeable, this was the first time in their lives that they had seen so many gems of such high quality. Even the Ji family rarely took out so many gems at once. Crazy! These tribesmen from the other side of the sea were all crazy. Bo-yi was so excited his face turned red. These gems were all theirs. All of them. The number of people beating the drums increased from 1 to 5. The drums were also changed to a bigger model. With 5 people beating the drums at the same time, it was as if they were going to break the drums. The people nearby felt as if thunder was rumbling in their ears. The rumbling of the drums could be heard by the entire royal city. More and more people came to the gambling den and placed their bet. However, no one in the royal city touched the Yanjiao section. Of course they had to participate in a bet like this where the results could be predicted. They were here to make money, not lose money. Bo-e looked at the increasing amount of valuables on the table. He started calculating the odds of each section based on the value of the items. He was calculating how they could make the most out of it. Chapter 829. The tribesmen who came over put up their own gemstones. Those who didn't have any gemstones were persuaded by the gambling house to put up their weapons, but they refused. Tribesmen could live without gems, but they couldn't live without weapons. Otherwise, what would they use to fight if a war broke out? Those gems? Bo-e thought it was a pity. He heard from his sources that the Flaming Horns had many good quality weapons. He wanted to trick them into giving him their weapons, but he didn't expect these tribesmen to be so cautious and stubborn. They wouldn't give in no matter what he said. Although it was a pity, looking at the mountain of gems on the table, Bo-e was excited again. They were rich. This was a huge haul. As the number of participants increased, Bo-e quickly came up with the best plan for himself. Those who bet that the Flaming Horn tribe would surpass the 6 tribes of King City had odds of 1 to 5. The other 6 bets were either 1 to 2 or 1 to 3. The odds here were all rounded. The lowest bet was only 1 to 2. Once the proposal was out, the number of people placing their bets increased. Some of the older gamblers had used Bo-e's proposal as a basis to place their bet. They were worried that there might be a trap. Now that the proposal was out, they felt more at ease. However, most of them chose the last few bet. Very few people placed their bets behind the G and E family. This meant that the people of Royal City didn't think Yanjiao would win. Even if Yanjiao sent the Lu family's previous head flying with a slap, it didn't prove anything. The G and E family of Royal City had a special place in Royal City's hearts. Only 1 to 5? I thought it would be 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, someone mumbled. More than one person thought so. Even Bo-e had planned to do so at first but quickly rejected it. First, these tribesmen had just arrived in Royal City. Bo-e didn't know how the 6 tribes of Royal City felt about them, so he didn't dare to make his bet too obvious. He wanted to do something like 1 to 11 to 100 to attract more bets so they could earn more. But he was worried that if he made it too obvious, these tribesmen with bad tempers would cause a ruckus. If chaos ensued, they would be the ones to take the blame. The gains would not make up for the losses. 1-5 was just right. It didn't sound too different from the others. Why was it that there were so many gambling houses, but only Fubo could establish a foothold here? On one hand, Fubo was established early and had great strength. On the other hand, Fubo knew how to read people's faces and try to figure out the intentions of the nobles in the royal city. When it was time to do good, he should be firm. Besides, he had to give these tribesmen face and not make things too ugly. That way, he would be able to extort more money from them later on. Bo-e thought. When Bo-e told them the compensation, the people at the gambling den did not think much of it. No matter how much the Flaming Horn bet was, whatever they bet would still belong to them. Inside the palace, Xiao Xian was being led to where the Heaven and Earth Agreement book was. He saw Ji Fang's sword. The sword was not out of its scabbard, but he could feel the cold light hidden within. This must be the sword that Ji Fang used his blood to forge and used to ascend to the throne. Noticing Xiao Xian's interest in his sword, Ji Fang smiled. "Let's spar after we sign the contract?" "All right," Xiao Xian replied. Just then, a Yanjiao warrior came over. He was originally waiting outside the palace but rushed in because of the gambling house incident. He told Xiao Xian about what happened outside. "Grand Elder, everyone outside is talking about it." The warrior was displeased because the people outside were looking down on Yanjiao. They thought they were all rich idiot. Xiao Xian thought about it but did not answer directly. Instead, he said, When you leave the palace, let Gan Xie go with you. He doesn't want to stay in the palace. During the hunt for Si, Gan Xie did not travel with Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian let him check on the captured people first. However, after Gan Xie returned, he told Xiao Xian that there was a fire seed's aura in the palace that he did not like. He felt uncomfortable staying in the palace for too long and wanted to leave. After the Yanjiao warrior left, Ji Fang continued leading Xiao Xian and the others towards the Heaven and Earth Agreement book. He knew about the gambling house but didn't care. It's right in front. Ji Fang slowed down, his expression turning serious. Gigu and Ao could feel the strong fire seed's aura. They had sensed it when they first entered the palace, but now that they were closer, the feeling was even stronger. There was no sense of rejection from a foreign tribe's fire seed. The fire seed's aura seemed to be controlled in a very small area, like a sleeping person, its presence reduced. There's a fire seed inside? Gigu looked over in surprise. Because of the high walls, he could not see what was going on inside. The people here had long ceased to exist as tribes. The primitive fire seeds of each tribe had been merged into the bodies of their members and passed down through their bloodlines. Then, what was the fire seed's aura inside? It was definitely a primitive fire seed. But why didn't it reject them? Ji Fang smiled mysteriously but did not explain. You'll know once you go in. The security was tight, so Ji Fang did not plan to bring too many people in. Only Xiao Xian, Gigu, Ao and Ta were allowed in. He wanted to sign a contract with Yanjiao. It had nothing to do with the other tribes, so he would not let them in, even if they were part of the Flaming River Alliance. Ji Fang only cared about Yanjiao. More accurately, the only person he was wary of was Xiao Xian. Rumble. The heavy metal door was pushed open. Ji Fang went in first. Xiao Xian and the rest scanned their surroundings before walking in. Other than Ji Fang, there were 5 other people inside. They were from the other 5 families of the royal city. The Yi family's representative was not Yi Tuan. Instead, it was an old man Xiao Xian had never seen before. This person had not participated in the battle between the Yi family and Yi Xiang. Unlike the arrogant Yi family members, this old man was very low-key. Compared to the people from the other 4 families, he did not have much of a presence. When Xiao Xian looked over, the old man's head was slightly lowered, his eyelids drooping. He did not meet Xiao Xian's gaze. After looking at the old man, Xiao Xian noticed the stone mountain in the middle of the yard. The yard was very large and filled with many flowers and trees. It looked like a well-tended garden. The stone mountain in the middle looked like a fake mountain used to decorate the garden. Its purpose seemed to be to create scenery. However, no one who entered this courtyard would ignore it because the strong aura of the fire seed was emitted from it. It was the main body of the yard. There was a huge amount of power hidden inside. Stepping into the yard, the fire seed aura grew stronger. Even the slowest person could feel it. However, just as Gui He and the others had sensed before, the aura of the fire seed from this mountain was only limited to a small area. Outside this area, it was very difficult to sense it. Other places in the palace might not be able to sense this aura, let alone people outside the palace. It was no wonder that they did not know when they first entered the city, because they could not sense the aura of the fire seed. Xiao Xian looked at the mountain. It was like a miniature mountain, very similar to the steep cliffs in the forest. The highest point of the mountain was almost 20 meters above the ground. It was almost 100 meters long and formed the shape of the letter 1. One side of the mountain was steep, while the other side was like a cliff, like a mountain wall. On the other side of the cliff, Xiao Xian saw some totemic patterns. Other than the Ji family, there were also the emblems of the other 5 families in the royal city. There were also some from other tribes and organizations. Xiao Xian saw the symbol of the Black Bear Caravan. These were all signs of a contract with the Ji family. The size and depth of the totemic patterns were different. The lighter the pattern, the older it was. The pattern of the Black Bear caravan was lighter. The previous leader of the Black Bear caravan must have made a contract with the G family. Of course, the G family would not allow a caravan without a contract to grow in the royal city. As for the size of the totemic patterns, Xiao Xian took a look. The 6 noble families in the royal city had the largest totemic patterns, especially the G family and the E family. They were obviously larger than the others, but the difference between the two families was not obvious. In fact, the G family was only slightly larger than the E family. Could this be the heaven and earth contract? Gigu asked uncertainly. Yes, it is. Ji Fang stood in front of the mountain, looking at the large and small totemic patterns on it. His heart swelled with pride again. There was a reason why the royal city was located here. In the beginning, the ancestors of the Ji family chose this place because they thought that if they were faced with an invincible enemy, be it human or beast, the Ji family could use the heaven and earth contract book's power to make a last stand when there was no way out. Why did the Ji family suppress the other families to become the dominant family in the royal city? Strength was one reason, but there was another. Back then, only the Ji family could gain the recognition of the mountain. Even the E family, who always thought their fire seed was the strongest, could not do it. According to the records left behind by the Ji family's ancestors, it was their blood that awakened the mountain. This mountain only recognized members of the Ji family, and only those with a strong enough royal bloodline in the Ji family. It did not recognize the weak. Another unknown reason why Ji Fang was able to succeed was that he had gained the recognition of the mountain. Without the royal bloodline of the Ji family, no one could leave a mark on the mountain. Yes, not a single mark. Even if the Gongjia family's sharp swords left a mark on the mountain, it would disappear very quickly, as if the mountain had erased it. This was why Ji Fang said that once a contract was signed on the heaven and earth contract, it could not be changed. Gui He and the others looked up at the mountain in front of them. This mountain wall was more like a totem wall carved with all kinds of totems. Inside it was a primitive fire seed that did not belong to any tribe, person, or beast. They had always thought that the heaven and earth contract was made from animal skin, cloth or plants, similar to the animal skin rolls they use. They did not expect the heaven and earth contract to be a mountain. There was a primitive fire seed attached to it. From a certain point of view, this mountain was alive. Chapter 830. Xiao Xian could feel the power of the fire seed flowing within the mountain. However, just like humans, the totemic warriors who were not in battle usually did not display their powers. Similarly, this mountain was the same. Judging from its appearance, there was nothing special about this mountain other than the fact that there were no plants growing on it. Do we sign the contract now? Xiao Xian asked. If you want, we can do it now. You've already seen the contract. If you don't object, we can sign it now, said Ji Fang. To keep Yanjiao in check, Ji Fang had offered very good terms. Everyone had to interact peacefully and not fight. They had to abide by each other's rules when they were in each other's territory. The time limit was 100 years. Royal City needed to expand and deal with internal and external matters. The same was true for Yanjiao. They needed time to develop. This was beneficial to both sides. 100 years sounded like a long time, but in reality, it was less than half the lifespan of many tribesmen. If Ji Fang could hold the throne for 100 years, it was not impossible for him to sit on the throne for 100 years. Moreover, even if Ji Fang was no longer around after 100 years, the contract would still be in effect. The successor would continue to abide by it. Just like the contract signed between the Black Bears and Royal City. It was still in effect. No matter who became the leader of the Black Bears, they would abide by the contract until it expired. Xiao Xian looked at Gigu and the others. Seeing that they had no objections, he nodded. Then let's sign the contract now. Ji Fang passed a scroll made of animal skin to Xiao Xian and the others. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he took the scroll and walked to the mountain wall. He paced back and forth and stopped at a spot. Pointing at the wall, he said to Xiao Xian, "There's more space here. Let's sign it here." When Xiao Xian nodded, Ji Fang's expression turned solemn. He raised his right hand and with a shake, his palm split open. Blood flowed out. Before the blood dripped, Ji Fang had already pressed his bleeding palm against the mountain wall. At the same time, some veins appeared on his body. Xiao Xian had seen those veins on Ji Ju before. The fire seed of the Ji family radiated from Ji Fang. A ball of fire appeared on his palm. At the same time, Ji Fang began to recite the contents of the contract. With every word he recited, a portion of the totem pattern on his palm was completed. When the 1-meter-long totem pattern was completely formed, the content of the contract was almost finished. For a period of 100 years. As the last word was spoken, a ring of red light appeared around the Ji family's totem. It was the fire seed of the mountain. This circle of flames surrounded the totem mark left behind by Ji Fang. Ji Fang retracted his hand. The totem mark on the mountain wall was still there, and so was the circle of red flames. Taking 2 steps back, Ji Fang gestured for Xiao Xian to come forward. "You just need to leave your imprint at the side." Xiao Xian nodded. He walked forward and pressed his hand against the mountain wall, right beside the Ji family's totem mark. The moment Xiao Xian's hand touched the wall, the red flames around the Ji family's totem mark extended towards him. Xiao Xian closed his eyes. He could feel the flow of energy within the mountain and the fire seed in the heart of the mountain. Perhaps others would find the fire seed in the mountain unfamiliar. Even if it did not show any strong resistance, it would still give off a certain amount of pressure. The closer one was to it, the more uncomfortable the pressure would be. However, Xiao Xian was different. He did not feel the pressure from the mountain's fire seed. He felt that the fire seed inside was familiar, similar to the white flames inside his body. Other than that, the contract was a manifestation of the fire seed's power. Xiao Xian could feel every bit of energy flowing through his palm. Opening his eyes, a white flame appeared in Xiao Xian's eyes. The totem mark on his body spread rapidly. The power of the Yanjiao fire seed in his blood surged towards his palm. The aura of the Yanjiao fire seed spread outwards. Outside the palace, the gambling den had received news from a few aristocrats that Yanjiao was about to sign a contract with the royal city. Hence, the people gathered there did not leave. To prevent anyone from stealing from the gambling table, Bo Yi sent many people over. They surrounded the gambling table in 3 layers. Everyone looked around like they were guarding against thieves. Those who wanted to place their bets would place their bets through the only gap left. When they felt the movement of the fire seed from the palace, they knew that the contract had begun. "It's the aura of the Yanjiao fire seed," Abuli said. "Guess who's in charge of signing the contract on Yanjiao's side?" someone asked. "Do you even need to ask?" Everyone looked at the person who asked the question like he was an idiot. "Yes, do you even need to ask? The person in charge of signing the contract on Yanjiao's side must be their first elder, Xiao Xian." The entire royal city seemed to be shocked by this sudden change. Everyone around the gambling den stared nervously at the palace, carefully sensing the movement of the fire seed's power. Although they could not see what was going on, they could guess from the changes in the fire seed's power. In a house not far from the gambling house, Su Li and the dozens of Changles who had rushed over to watch the show were also paying attention to the happenings in the palace. At the same time, they were also keeping an eye on the gambling house. Watching a commotion was important. When necessary, they would still find some entertainment. They were the best at taking advantage of the chaos. Inside the palace, in the garden where the Heaven and Earth contract book was, Ji Fang sensed the Yanjiao fire seed aura emanating from Xiao Xian's body and frowned. Xiao Xian's fire seed aura was becoming strange. There seemed to be something else in it. It was not just the Yanjiao fire seed aura. What was it? Ji Fang's pearl twitched. He looked at the mountain wall, then at Xiao Xian. He was suspicious. According to convention, Yanjiao's totemic mark should have appeared. But why was there no sign of Yanjiao's horns under Xiao Xian's palm? Just as he was wondering, Ji Fang suddenly heard a rumbling sound. It sounded like a boulder rolling, but also like a sudden clap of thunder. Everyone in the garden was shocked. White flames emerged from Xiao Xian's palms. Then, a line of white flames extended from his palms until it reached the middle of the mountain wall. It continued to extend upwards, but at the same time, another line of flames appeared horizontally, extending to both sides. The white flames intersected vertically and horizontally in the shape of a cross. The mountain was shaking, and some small stones that were as small as sand rolled down the mountain. However, these small stones that looked like sand made a deafening sound, as if a landslide was sweeping down. The rumbling sound was like thunder, incessantly ringing in the ears. Whoosh, red flames spewed out from all parts of the mountain. The more flames there were, the more the mountain trembled. It was like a dormant volcano had finally awakened. Splendid sparks flew everywhere, and the flames continued to rise from the mountain. The rising flames from the mountain reflected a red light in Xiao Xian's eyes. But it was like a grain of sand in the midst of the white flames. Gigu and the rest looked in that direction in shock. Was the signing of the contract so loud? If Ji Fang and the rest in the garden knew what they were thinking, they would be even more shocked. No, you're thinking too much. This was not the case when they signed the contract. In the past, no matter which tribe or organization they signed the contract with, even if there was a huge commotion when they left the seal, it would only be within a limited area. It would not be so intense. It gave people the feeling that everything was under the mountain's control. However, at this moment, the situation in front of him was more like a mountain that could not be controlled. Forget about control. Ji Fang even felt like the mountain was letting it go. Ji Fang's eyelids twitched. He felt like things were getting out of his control. The rumbling in the garden grew more intense. Strong winds blew, stirring up fine dust. The leaves of the flowers and plants were swept into the air by the wind. It was like a storm was coming. Seeing this situation, the Mu family's patriarch was so shocked that he sucked in a breath. However, he choked on the dust in the air due to the vibrations. Immediately, he coughed violently, as if he wanted to cough out the blood in his heart. The others ignored the coughing patriarch and stared blankly at the mountain in the middle of the garden. The elder from the Yi family was even more shocked. Wasn't it just signing a contract? How could this be? Outside the palace, the people who had been paying attention also heard the rumbling from the palace. If not for the bright sun and clear sky, they would have thought it was thunder. What happened? The timid person's teeth were chattering as he asked, his voice trembling. Some people quickly recovered and laughed at the others for making a fuss. It's normal. Signing a contract in the heaven and earth contract will naturally cause a huge commotion. There's no need to worry. Really? Many people were doubtful. They could not be blamed for being timid. The disaster back then had scared them to the point that they had developed a phobia. Hearing this sound and commotion made them feel uneasy. Of course it's true. The people who said there was no need to worry tried their best to maintain a calm expression and insisted on their views. They had to keep up the act even if they had to. Bo-e repeatedly reminded his subordinates to pay attention to their surroundings so that no one could steal anything during the chaos. Abuli and the others looked at them curiously and sighed. So that's how signing a contract works. In a nearby house, Su Li stood up. His eyes flashed as he said to the Changle people, "Something's wrong." He loved to take advantage of the chaos to make a fortune. It was not that he was interested in the gemstones. He just wanted to see those people's helpless expressions when they lost their belongings and wanted to bite the Chong Lis to death. Keep an eye on the gambling table. Once there's a chance, start. Before Suli could finish, Wu He shook his head vehemently. I'm not doing it. If you want to do it, go ahead. I'm not participating. Chapter 831. Coward. This was how the others looked at Wu He. Some even looked at him with undisguised disdain. However, Wu He didn't care about their gazes. He still looked like a coward and wouldn't change his mind. As the chief, Su Lily should reprimand Wu He, who was unambitious. This was not in line with the Changle organization's excellent style. However, when he was about to speak, Su Lily remembered how Wu He and the others were captured by the flaming horns. From then on, they became messengers. After some thought, Su Li said, "Fine." He then looked around. Is there anyone else who thinks the same as Wu He? Another 4 people backed out. They were all people who often worked with the Changles. They were all people who were traumatized by the Yanjiao. Su Li didn't force them. In fact, he was traumatized as well. However, he didn't think it would be a problem if they just got involved. Just as everyone was about to make a move, something strange happened. Look, what's that? Is there something wrong with my eyes? Why do I see a purple light over there? I see it too. Yes, it's purple. Those who were paying attention to the palace realized that there was a faint purple light over there. At the center of the palace, in the garden where the Heaven and Earth contract book was kept, the red flames that were spewing out from the mountain were gradually tinged with purple. This purple color was increasing. At first, it was only on the periphery of the flames, but then it seeped in. Xiao Xian's hand was still on the mountain wall. However, the white lines of fire had gradually formed a large intersecting shaman pattern on the mountain wall. The lines of fire extended across the mountain wall without any obstruction. This pattern made up of white lines of fire almost covered the entire mountain wall. The mountain wall was 20 meters tall, so this shaman pattern was almost 20 meters tall. Ancestor Shaman Seal. The old man from the Yi family was shocked. More and more flames spewed out from the mountain. The red flames were quickly replaced by purple. Even the surrounding flames were turning purple at the same speed. Purple flames? What shocked the crowd even more was that, during the process of the formation of the white magical pattern, the markings left behind by the other clans after signing the contract were all moving. It wasn't the totem that moved, but the mountain itself. It was the mountain that moved all the places with the totem marks. His goal was to clear out more space for the shaman patterns. The people from Royal City who were watching all of this became even more silent, their eyes almost lifeless. The scene before him had far exceeded Ji Fang's expectations. The fire seed in this mountain was purple, but that color had not appeared in a long time. Ji Fang only knew about it from his ancestor's note. Later on, some people said that the fire seed in the mountain was a primitive fire seed. It would not be integrated into the bloodstream like the human tribes, so it could not escape the fate of being weak. Ji Fang had always thought that the mountain would never be able to emit the purple flames of its original form. But now, the purple flames had appeared again. The reason? Ji Fang stared intently at the giant progenitor shaman seal on the mountain wall, as well as the 2-horned totem in the center of the progenitor shaman seal. He tightened his grip on the sword hilt, and the veins on the back of his hand bulged. All the muscles on his body were trembling slightly. Why did it have to be Yanjiao? He suddenly regretted signing the contract with Yanjiao. When the contract was signed, it meant that he could not easily attack Yanjiao's flaming river basin, no matter if it was in the open or in the dark. But thinking of something, Ji Fang lowered his eyelids and relaxed his grip on the sword hilt. A strange smile appeared on his face, but he quickly hid it so no one saw it. The mountain that served as the Heaven and Earth contract book was bursting with flames from every part of it. The flames shot straight up, and the purple flames began to spread in all directions. The roof and eaves of the palace were covered in a layer of hazy purple light. This was caused by the purple flames. As time passed, the mysterious purple light grew stronger and stronger. The area covered by the purple light extended outwards from the palace. The flowing purple flames spread outwards from the palace. Soon, some of the streets, houses, people and other objects in the center of the royal city were enveloped in the purple flames. The streets were filled with cries of surprise. Everyone who had been in their houses, no matter what they had been doing, came out now. Everywhere on the streets there were people dressed in different styles. They were either nobles or travelers. They all stood outside in shock, looking at the palace as if they were on a pilgrimage. At this moment, the sky above the palace was almost purple. At this moment, the light of the sun seemed to be suppressed. The streets became congested. The roads that used to be wide enough for huge beasts to pass through were now filled with people. Many of the beasts could not move forward, nor could they retreat. They were all people. This was the first time they could clearly feel how many people there were in the royal city. More importantly, the heaven and earth contract was a new level of mystery in their mind. They had only heard of it from their elders, or experienced it in the royal city. But this was the first time this had happened. Even the stories left behind by their elders did not mention it. The fire seed's aura emanated from the palace. It did not belong to any tribe, but it did not have the strong repulsion of an alien fire seed. Instead, it aroused people's admiration and respect for the fire seed. Those who still retained their tribal habits had the urge to kneel down and worship it. At the gambling den, the gamblers had already forgotten about their bet. Abuli and the rest also turned their attention to the palace, trying to guess what had happened there. Could it be that something had changed? Did they need reinforcements? Should they call for reinforcements and rush in? However, there were still people who remembered the bet. For example, the leader of the gambling den, Bo-yi. Unlike his excitement and eagerness when he placed his bet, Bo-yi's face was deathly pale. Large beads of sweat dripped from his forehead, and he didn't even bother to wipe them off. His eyes darted around rapidly. Those who knew him well knew that he was deep in thought. He was seriously calculating a large number of calculations. Bo-yi was calculating the result of this bet. Similar to EC's ability to predict things that had happened, were happening, or had yet to happen based on the changes in the environment and details, even though Bo-yi wasn't at EC's level, generally speaking, based on what had happened, after careful consideration, he had a 70% chance of being correct. However, every time Bo-yi calculated, the conclusion he came up with sent chills down his spine. The first time the purple light appeared, he calculated that there was a 30% chance that Abuli would win. Although 30% was not much of an advantage, it was a blow to their confidence. This was the beginning of change. The second time was when the purple light enveloped the palace. He calculated that there was a 50% chance that he would lose. The third time was when the purple light spread to the streets of the royal city. There was a 70% chance that Abuli would win. Now, the purple light was still spreading. Bo-yi did not dare to calculate any further. What should I do? Bo-yi looked at the mountain of items on the table. Luckily, it was only 5. If it was 110 or 100, how could he survive? That's not right. 5 is not a small amount. If he really lost everything in the gambling den, I can't take it lying down. Bo-yi swallowed his saliva and pulled the person beside him back to reality. He lowered his voice and whispered a few words. That person's expression changed, but he quickly recovered. Putting on a similar expression as the others, he quietly retreated. Every few steps he took, he would pause for a moment. His lips moved quickly, passing the words to the people there in a way that others couldn't hear. Then, he continued to retreat to the next place. After that, the people in the gambling house who received the news began to move. There was no need for unnecessary eye contact as they had already begun to cooperate. Some were responsible for blocking the view, some were loudly speculating about the current situation to divert the attention of the people around them, and some were quietly moving the money on the gambling table. Bo-e had his eyes on the items the tribesmen had placed down at the beginning. For example, those bags of crystals. They probably didn't count how many there were in there, right? He wanted to use this opportunity to move some of the items out. If he was forced to pay up, he would at least have to pay less. He also thought about taking all the items and running away. But if he did that, his gambling den would be ruined and he would not be able to stay in the royal city any longer. Just as he was thinking about what to use to trick these tribesmen, Bo-e heard a loud shout. Someone's stealing from the table. Bo-e almost vomited blood. Which bastard shouted that? He looked towards the direction of the shout but could only see the crowd. He could not find the person who had just shouted. However, the shout also alerted the people who had been looking at the palace. Stealing? Who's stealing? Kill them. The gamblers stared at the table. It's the gambling den, I saw it. Someone in the crowd said. Under the murderous gazes, Bo-e braced himself and shouted back at the gamblers. Bullshit, this is slander. Just as the gamblers were about to clash with the gambling den's people, a few figures flashed past. Each of them ran in a different direction. Some were in charge of covering, while others were in charge of stealing the items on the table. The gambling den is stealing again. A shrill voice shouted from the crowd. I want my items back. I want them back too. Bo-e was about to vomit blood. It really wasn't their people this time. Someone was causing trouble. Whoosh, this seemed to have opened a valve. Some of the spectators and gamblers who had been hiding their intentions began to spill out. Why not take some during the chaos? Just a little bit, then run away. The items that Abuli and the others took out made many people greedy for them. Faced with the crazy crowd, the gambling den's people guarding the tables could not hold them off. If this was in the past, they would be able to hold off the gamblers' attack. But today there were too many people coming out of the palace. With the addition of the surrounding gamblers, they could not hold them off. Plus, there were people who were skillfully breaking through the gambling den's defensive perimeter. Boss, we can't hold them off. The veins on Bo-e's forehead were bulging. He took a few deep breaths and was about to say something when a tiger-like roar came from the crowd. Roar, a warrior from the water tiger tribe, had tiger-like stripes all over his body. He opened his mouth 3 times bigger and let out a roar that caused visible ripples in the air. Ching-e from the drumming tribe also had crocodile totemic tattoos on his body. He was no longer as gentle as before. Now, he was like a cold predator. A low rumbling sound came from his throat. You and the others from the Pooh tribe had brightly painted eyelids. Their frog-like croaks were not obvious in the crowd. But from the wooden spikes that came out of their fingers, it was clear that they were about to make their move. Those who took our things, don't let a single one of them go. When Abuli saw that the large crystal that he had bet on the gambling table had disappeared, he jumped up in anger. Then, his 2 large feet stomped on the ground quickly. Those who were not familiar with the drumming tribe would think that he was hopping mad. But those who were familiar with the drumming tribe knew that those big feet had their uses. On another street in the royal city, some tribesmen were squinting their eyes, trying their best to see their surroundings. Suddenly, their bodies froze and they fell to the ground at the same time. The people around saw the short and fat guys lying on the ground and thought that they were going to dig a hole. Just as they were about to say something, the short and fat guys got up and called out to their companions, "Someone's stealing our things at the gambling den." When the others heard that, they picked up their weapons and ran towards the gambling den. The people around them started talking. They heard what the short and fat guys said. Although they couldn't pronounce it correctly, they still understood the gist of it. Gambling den. There's only one gambling den in the royal city. The few of them looked at each other, eager to watch the show. Let's go take a look. Chapter 832. More and more people from the royal city rushed to the street where the gambling house was located. Although many people knew about the gambling house, not everyone had the time and interest to gamble. But now that they heard about the disturbance, many people were interested. After all, there were people from another continent involved in this incident. They were curious. The gambling house was already in chaos. Totemic power exploded one after another. Various patterns appeared. Roars and screams, the sound of fists and swords clashing, and the sound of broken objects all mixed together. The totemic power of the drumming tribe members rose rapidly, and their bodies underwent obvious changes. The 30 or so people who came here together rushed towards the people holding the water moonstones. Others might have made a mistake, but the people of the drumming tribe wouldn't. They had an innate ability to sense the water moonstones. As long as it was nearby, they could sense it. Although there were water moonstones in the royal city, there weren't many of them. Even if there were, the people of the royal city wouldn't take them out and hide them. When it came to betting, other than the drumming tribe, no one else would bet on water moonstones. So, those who had water moonstones near the gambling house must have stolen them from the gambling table. They didn't need to be polite to those who took advantage of the chaos to steal. Wei, the vice leader of the Yanjiao hunting team, and the hunting team leaders, Mai and Cheng, also brought people to the gambling house. When Xiao Xian, Gigu, Ao, Ta and other team leaders weren't around, they were the ones who led the team. They rushed over immediately after receiving the news, along with people from other tribes in the team. If only one tribe received the news, it wouldn't be a big deal. Maybe someone got into a conflict somewhere and asked for help. But suddenly, all the tribes asked for help at the same time. This was a serious matter. At first, they thought that the royal city really wanted to kill them. They only found out the whole story on the way here. Looking at the chaotic battlefield, the leaders looked at each other and rushed to the battlefield at the same time. They didn't shout, "Stop, we can talk slowly," or "Everyone calm down." They didn't even think about whether they could win this fight on the busiest street in the royal city. If he was robbed, bullied, or beaten, what should he do? As long as there was a shred of Yanjiao blood left in them, there was only one choice: a direct confrontation. Wei, Mai, and Qing rushed into the most intense battle and faced the people from the gambling house. Mai tilted his head to avoid the incoming fist. He reached out to grab the man without even looking and flung him to the side. The Yanjiao man's strength directly flung the man into the room on the second floor of the casino. He crashed through the wooden window and fell into the room. When the soldiers who had just arrived at Yanjiao saw that Wei and the others had already rushed in, they did not hesitate to rush in. The other tribesmen from the Flaming River Valley who heard the news rushed over. When they saw that the Yanjiao had already started fighting, they didn't hesitate. Attack! In battle mode, the Flaming Horn tribesmen's bones were hard and their explosive power was strong. With the advantage of their physique, they charged forward and pushed away the people they didn't know in front of them. They were not on the Flaming River tribe's side anyway, so they didn't show any mercy when they charged forward. Those who were hit by the Yanjiao tribesmen were sent flying along with their sword. At the same time, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. Other than the Yanjiao tribesmen, the other tribesmen from the Flaming River Valley had all followed the Yanjiao into the forest to hunt, so they were also a little ferocious. Therefore, when they exploded and there were more people, the atmosphere was different. The spectators in the royal city were all stunned. Their impression of the tribesmen on the other side of the sea changed. Ferocious. All of them were ferocious. They were really ferocious. It was as if they were fierce beasts in the forest whose prey had been snatched away. In just a short span of time, the bustling street in the royal city had become a battlefield. As more and more people joined in, the scale of the battle continued to expand. The people who were sent flying crashed into the houses on both sides of the street. There were holes in the walls, and the people who fell into the houses broke the tables, chairs, and shelves inside. The shops on both sides of the battlefield suffered, but the shop owners were not in a hurry. Those who didn't want to be involved in the battle started calculating the compensation. When this battle was over, they would pay a visit to the organizations that destroyed their shop. They even hoped that there were many tribesmen who fell in. That way, they could extort a lot of gemstones from the tribesmen. The owner of a wine shop was quickly writing down the losses in his shop. He didn't forget which organization, tribe, or caravan had fallen into his shop. Even if he wanted to extort a large sum of money, he had to have a reasonable reason. Another person fell in. The only undamaged table in the corner of the shop was smashed. The owner was disappointed that this person wasn't a tribesman. The man who crashed into the room cried out in pain. The sword in his hand was lost when he was kicked away. After getting up, he looked left and right, picked up 2 table legs and rushed out again. Bowie looked at the badly damaged gambling house, then at the crowd of people in front of the gambling house. His face turned green with anger. What was even more infuriating was that there were short and fat men with long beards running around, shouting, "The gambling house doesn't want to admit their losses. They're robbing us." Their pronunciation was a little strange, but they could still be understood. Hearing this, Bowie was so angry he wanted to vomit blood again. He wanted to say that the robbers were from the Chonglis. If he still couldn't tell who was causing trouble, he wouldn't be the head of the gambling house. However, the others refused to listen to him. It didn't matter if the tribesmen believed him or not. The gamblers didn't want to believe him. Or rather, they knew deep down but they just didn't want to believe it. This was such a good opportunity to take advantage of the chaos. They had lost so much money to the gambling house in the past, they would be idiots if they didn't get their money back now. Some of the gamblers even shouted, "The gambling house doesn't want to admit their losses." Bowie swore in his heart. Once this was over, he would wring their heads off. Ignoring everything else, Bowie looked at the big bearded men who were short in stature but nimble in the battle like loaches. He called out to his subordinates, "Get those fatties to shut up first." The tribesmen pushed the people in front of them aside with their short and thick hands. After a while, they got up and shouted. This made some of the people in Royal City who didn't know what was going on hesitate. They were all from the Royal City, so they would definitely help the Royal City side. But when they heard the reason, they stopped moving forward. Should they get involved in this mess? However, some greedy people wanted to take advantage of the situation to blackmail them. They would only help if the gambling house offered them some benefit. Bowie's face darkened with anger. While Pai was shouting excitedly, a man suddenly rushed out and swung his sword at him. Pai quickly ran away in fear, but the people behind him still kept their eyes on him. Then, 2 more tribesmen came to surround Digu. Digu was so excited that he forgot his chief's warning. He ran away from the place where there were a lot of people. Among the tribesmen, he ran the furthest. The others had their own people to help them when they were surrounded, but he couldn't. Even if he called for help now, it was useless. Pai regretted it, so he could only run. The ground of the royal city was too hard. If it was dirt, he would have dug a hole long ago. The 3 men purposely forced Pai out of the circle. Being in the circle was advantageous for Pai. The 3 men's movements were hindered, but once he left the circle, the tables would turn. The gambling house was familiar with this street, so they had the advantage. Pai tripped over something and rolled like a ball. By the time he stopped, the 3 men had caught up to him. Although Pai couldn't see his surroundings clearly, he could still see the light reflected off the metal weapons. The murderous intent from the weapons made Pai's beard stand on end. However, in the next moment, the 3 men who were charging at Pai flew backwards and rolled a few times on the ground before stopping. The people from the gambling house who couldn't get up felt pain spread through their bodies. They spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood and almost fainted. When they saw who attacked them, they were shocked and angry. Before he could finish, he choked on the blood in his throat. His finger trembled as he pointed at Baimi. His eyes were filled with hatred, as if he didn't understand why the black bears would stand against them. Usually, there wouldn't be any direct conflicts between the famous groups in the royal city. The Fubo Casino was quite famous in the royal city. After all, there was only one casino in the entire royal city. Although the gambling house and the black bears weren't on good terms, they didn't directly fall out with each other. Who would have thought that the black bears would help the Yanjiao people at this critical moment? Who are the black bears helping? Another person from the gambling house forced himself to finish the sentence. Baimi didn't speak. Instead, it was Mauda who walked forward with his bare paw. He'd used this paw to slap the man. He snickered. Do you even need to ask? Thanks. Knowing that he was saved, Pa was excited. He got up and prepared to run towards the Yanjiao people. After a few steps, he turned back and narrowed his eyes at Baimi and the others. His beard twitched. You're not from the Flaming River? Who are you? His eyesight was the worst among the Yi tribesmen. Even though he was close, he couldn't see their faces clearly. He only saw a few blurry silhouettes, so he thought they were strong tribesmen from the Thunder Mountain or Water Tiger tribe. However, when he thought about what he heard and sensed the fire seed energy from these people, he knew they weren't from any of the Flaming River tribes he was familiar with. They weren't from the Longboat or Mang tribe either, but they were indeed helping him. That was why he ran back to ask them. Black bears, Baimi spoke up. I know you guys. Elder Xiao Xian mentioned you before. Then Pa ran away. It wasn't a good time to talk. The Yi tribesmen were never good at fighting. They had already realized their mistake of being too far away from the group. Pa decided to run to a place with his own people as soon as possible. If he was hunted down, he could find help. The black bears were helping him, but in comparison, Pa felt that his own people were more trustworthy. The other King City's people were stunned when they saw Baimi take action and bring other black bears people over. The smarter ones started to think of the reason. Especially the people from the trading party. They knew Baimi and the others well. Even if Baimi knew the Yanjiao people, he wouldn't help them so decisively. Merchants valued profit. If there wasn't enough profit to motivate them, they wouldn't do something like this. The people from the trading party always thought about profit. But then they thought, that's right. Yanjiao was going to sign a peace treaty with Royal City. This way, the trading party would definitely benefit greatly. They heard that there were a lot of gemstones on the other side of the sea. It would take a lot of effort to rob them, so trading with them was a good choice. But once they got there, they would be in the tribesmen's territory. Looking at the tribesmen who were fighting with the Royal City people, it wouldn't be good to use force. If they helped Yanjiao, maybe the trading party would be able to enjoy better treatment in Yanjiao's territory. Unfortunately, they were one step behind Baimi. TSK, the people of the Black Bear Caravan look honest, but they are all very cunning. Fortunately, it wasn't too late for them to see the truth. And so, the people who were originally helping the gambling house against Yanjiao changed their direction. Most of them were from the trading party. The gamblers and the gambling house people were stunned. Who are you helping? The people who changed their direction at the last minute smiled, but didn't say anything. They were helping profit. There were many factors to consider in this matter, but there was a reason why large trading parties were able to develop to their current scale. They knew how to choose the path with the most benefit. At first, they didn't realize it, but after seeing the Black Bear's actions, they understood. It was rare for Royal City to have thousands of people fighting, and it even involved tribesmen from another continent. The Royal City patrols who heard the commotion looked at each other, not knowing what to do. They had no choice but to ask Jisho for help. At the same time, the Changle people who started this mess were gathered in one corner, gloating over the situation. One of them threw a crystal as thick as an arm into the air, showing off the spoils of war. He didn't forget to poke at Wu He, who was huddled in a corner, not saying a word. Wu He ignored the sarcastic remarks and yawned. Just as he was about to tell Su Li that he was going back to sleep and that he wouldn't be joining the celebration party, he took 2 steps towards the door and his face turned pale. It was as if his entire body was frozen stiff. Su Li, who was sitting at the head of the table, no longer had that smug smile on his face. It was replaced with a serious expression, and there was a deep sense of fear in his eyes. The laughing crowd followed their gaze. It was the door. The person closest to the door pushed it open, then quickly retreated. After taking a few steps back, he looked at the open door and saw the person standing there silently. There was no breathing, no heartbeat. When the person outside the door stood there silently, he didn't seem to exist at all. No one knew how long he had been there. Wu He's voice trembled. Gan Xie. Chapter 833. Wu He's first fear was Xiao Xian. His second fear wasn't Chief Su Li, but Gan Xie. Wu He's teeth chattered as he looked at Gan Xie blocking the door. When he was released by the Yanjiao on the other side of the continent, he didn't dare to do anything in Yanjiao territory for a long time, but he still observed them. Because of that, Wu He wanted to know more about the Yanjiao tribe. The more he observed, the more he realized that there were many special things in the Yanjiao tribe. For example, the wolf with 3 eyes. He heard that it used to be an ordinary beast that wasn't even considered a fearsome beast. Another example was the giant mountain eagle. It was said to have been raised since it was young. Other than the Hui tribe, it was the only giant mountain eagle raised by the tribesmen. Wu He knew very well how difficult it was to deal with the giant mountain eagles. There was also the bird-like creature and many other strange things. However, none of these were enough to make Wu He so wary. Wu He had the urge to run when he saw Gan Xie standing 5 steps away from him. However, he felt that some things should be cleared up. After all, he didn't participate in this incident. Just as Wu He was about to defend himself, Gan Xie slowly raised his hand. There was a ground ice stone in his hand. It was one that the Chonglis had missed when they were trying to steal it. They were in a hurry to leave, so they didn't go back and pick it up. Sizzle! The ground ice stone crumbled into dust in Gan Xie's hand. The atmosphere in the room stagnated, especially for the person who was also playing with the ground ice stone. Although the stone wasn't too hard, it wasn't so easy to crush it. Furthermore, without the use of any tools, he could easily do this with his fingers. Gan Xie's fingers didn't change at all. There wasn't even a mark. Su Li's expression darkened. He stared at Gan Xie cautiously. He felt a sense of danger. When he met Gan Xie's red eyes, his hair stood on end. On the other side, on the street where the gambling house was located, the brawl spread to half the street in a short time. By the time Ji Shou and his men arrived, the houses and shops on both sides of the street were no longer intact. Broken tiles were strewn all over the place, especially when he heard those short and fat bearded men spreading the news that the royal city people were cheating and stealing. He was so angry that his blood vessels were about to explode. They all needed to be taught a lesson. All of you, stop! A roar filled with intense anger spread throughout the entire street. At the same time, many people in golden armor appeared, almost surrounding the entire street, especially in the center of the battlefield. Guards with bows appeared on some roofs along the street. Their cold eyes and sharp arrows were aimed at the battlefield. Under the shroud of the purple qi, the reflection of the armor was somewhat strange, causing those who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to shudder. The sound of the wooden whistle rang out with a specific rhythm, and the scattered Yanjiao soldiers quickly gathered in the direction of the sound. Ji Shou narrowed his eyes at the sight. These Yanjiao soldiers were obviously well trained, but they were different from the royal city soldiers. Their teamwork was honed through hunting. It was no wonder these people didn't have an advantage against the Yanjiao soldiers. Most of the people lying on the ground were from the royal city, but there were very few Yanjiao soldiers on the ground. The few that were on the ground were taken away when the Yanjiao soldiers closed the battlefield. There should still be people nearby taking care of the injured. When Ji Shou and the guards appeared, Wei blew the whistle for them to stop and gather. He had no doubt that if he ignored them, the Wang Qingjun would shoot. They didn't want to clash head-on with the guards in King City's territory. There was no benefit to it. The other flaming river tribes followed the Yanjiao's lead. When they saw the Yanjiao soldiers stop, they did the same. The Ya tribesmen stopped making a ruckus and quickly hid behind the Yanjiao soldiers, hiding their short, fat bodies. They preferred dark places where there was no light at all. It was dangerous to be exposed to Yangguang. It wasn't just the Yanjiao people. When the other royal city people saw Ji Shou, they immediately stopped and wanted to run. But the guards had already surrounded them. If they ran, the guards would mercilessly turn them into porcupines. Seeing the chaos on the street stop, Ji Shou's unhappiness subsided. At least he still had his authority. These people were still afraid of him and the guards. But in the next moment, Ji Shou heard a loud bang. The ground shook. The sound didn't come from this street, but from a distance. But it happened after he shouted for them to stop. It was like a provocation. The people on the street saw Ji Shou's face darken. The veins on his forehead bulged, and he looked like he wanted to eat someone. This made the royal city people, especially the gamblers, even more uneasy. They didn't dare to look directly at Ji Shou, only watching his movements from the corners of their eyes. Ji Shou tilted his head slightly. Without a word, the small group behind him quickly left, heading towards the source of the commotion. The happiest people were the people at the gambling house. They had suffered a great loss this time, losing both their people and their money. "General!" A junior manager of the gambling house ran over to Ji Shou as if he had seen his savior. "General?" Some of the flaming river tribesmen didn't know what a general was, but he seemed powerful. "General, help!" Before the manager of the gambling den could finish, he felt a gust of wind. The next moment, he felt a piercing pain in his abdomen. He spat out a mouthful of blood as the strong force sent him flying backward. The people on the street all shuddered, as if the kick just now had landed on their bodies, and they felt as if they had experienced it themselves. The muscles on Bo Yi's face twitched. His anger was quickly suppressed when Ji Shou looked over. He stopped himself from taking a step forward. Ji Shou didn't even look at the person who was kicked out, as if he was just a piece of trash. His eyes were cold and his murderous aura exploded from his body. The people on the street, especially those from Yanjiao, tensed up and looked at Ji Shou cautiously. Wei, Mai and the others' eyelids twitched. This person was much stronger than the people at the gambling house. He also seemed to have a murderous aura, like a hunter. However, Yanjiao's hunters were trained to hunt fearsome beasts. This person's targets were probably humans. There were many strong people in the royal city, such as this person. Ji Shou's kick was covered in murderous aura. The person from the gambling house didn't scream, but it sounded like an inaudible wail echoed in everyone's ears. Ji Shou didn't draw his sword, but he didn't seem any less dangerous. He looked around coldly and slowly walked forward. He didn't move quickly and didn't look imposing, but those in the royal city who knew Ji Shou didn't underestimate him. Even the black bears were nervous. Ji Shou walked casually on the messy street, the wood under his feet cracking under his feet. With every step he took, the people from the royal city took a step back in unison, their eyes filled with fear. Wei and the others didn't retreat. When they saw Ji Shou reach for them, they said, "You want to attack us too? You people from the royal city stole first. You can't afford to lose and you steal." Before Wei could finish, Ji Shou was already laughing, his face full of disdain. "You should be thankful that Flaming Horn has Shao Xian. Otherwise, no matter what, anyone who caused trouble in King City would be killed. If it weren't for the special situation today, he would have washed the street with blood." Ji Shou was mocking Yanjiao. Without Shao Xian, Yanjiao and the Flaming River Valley would be nothing. They wouldn't be able to walk the streets of the royal city peacefully and cause such a ruckus. If people from other tribes or organizations in the royal city heard this, they would have been angry. It was an insult. However, Ji Shou was facing a group of Yanjiao tribesmen. When they heard Ji Shou's words, the Flaming Horn tribesmen had an expression of we're very lucky too. Ji Shou. It was like being fed a mouthful of moldy grain. Ji Shou felt like he couldn't communicate with these tribesmen. But the Yanjiao tribesmen really thought the same. They didn't think there was anything to be angry about. Shouldn't they be proud that their tribe had such a powerful person? Ji Shou took a deep breath. He didn't want to waste time with these tribesmen. He swept his gaze across the people on the street and said coldly, "Put down what you shouldn't have or I'll kill you." Thud. Slap. They'd planned to leave after getting some money, but now they threw it away like it was a hot rock. Compared to the benefits before them, their lives were more important. Some of them still held on to the hope that Ji Shou would not be able to find them. However, they were bumped into by their companions, whose eyes warned them not to throw their lives away for such trivial things. Ji Shou usually didn't care about small fights in the city, but once he did, it would be cruel. It was not an exaggeration to call it a bloodbath. He might even take his anger out on them. They didn't want to be implicated. Ji Shou stood there indifferently, as if he didn't know the people in the crowd were struggling. A group of guards quickly walked down the street, picking up the things thrown away and gathering them together. "Look, what's missing," said Ji Shou. The tribesmen who'd placed their bets looked at Wei and Mai. With their agreement, they started searching for their own things. They didn't take anything randomly. They didn't care about the other gamblers in the royal city. There was no need to steal. They just needed to get their own. "Where's my crystal?" Abuli shouted, dissatisfied. After hearing that Xiao Xian was called crystal, Abuli changed his tone. Many people had seen Abuli's crystal before. It couldn't be faked. Everyone turned to look at the people in the gambling house. "We didn't take it." Bo-E panted heavily. He had to be the scapegoat. "Here." An emotionless voice sounded. At the same time, the crystal as thick as an arm was thrown at Abuli. Abuli caught the crystal and looked at Gonxie happily. "Gonxie, you found it for me? Thank you." Gonxie's clothes were torn in many places. The most obvious were the knives and arrows that pierced through his body. Seeing Gonxie like this, the Yanjiao people weren't too surprised. When they fought on the streets, they had to protect their own lives. But Gonxie was different. He fought with his life on the line. They had seen this many times. "Ah, Gonxie, you've been stabbed!" Abuli shouted. "Quick, quick, quick!" The people from King City thought that this big-footed tycoon was going to call for a witch doctor. Abuli threw the crystal in his hand to the person beside him, then grabbed the handle of the dagger that was exposed on Gonxie's body, and pulled it out. He pulled it out, the streets fell silent again. "Hey, there's another arrow!" He pulled it out again. There was no blood, no flesh and blood. There wasn't even a cry of pain. No, it was more accurate to say that Gonxie, who had been hit countless times, didn't make a sound. His expression didn't even change. It was as if he couldn't feel the injuries on his body. "Hey, you have a lot of things on you. But they're too small. It's hard to pull them out." Abuli felt that since Gonxie helped him find the crystal, he should help. However, Gonxie was getting impatient. He pushed Abuli away and the hidden weapons that had been stabbed into his body came out. They fell to the ground with a clatter. Ji Shou, the guards. Luckily, they had undergone strict training. Otherwise, if their hands trembled, the arrows on their bows would have been shot. If they shot by mistake, they would be killed by Ji Shou. The royal city people gulped. They looked at Gonxie as if he was a monster. Thus, Gonxie gained another nickname in the royal city people's hearts, Undying Gonxie. Ji Shou's face twitched as he watched Gonxie expel the hidden weapons from his body without a single drop of blood. One of the guards hurried over and whispered something into Ji Shou's ear. They were the people who had been sent to check on the explosion. Hearing the report, Ji Shou's pupils constricted. His expression changed. The explosion came from one of the Chong Li's strongholds. It had been destroyed. Su Li was heavily injured and was rescued by other Chong Lis who had just arrived at Royal City. The number of casualties was unknown. The entire stronghold had been flattened and turned into sand. It was impossible to tell what it used to be. No other clues could be found. The person who had caused this was the person who had just arrived. Ji Shou only had one word to say about the Chong Lis. They deserved it. However, there was indeed a dangerous person in Yanjiao's group. Gan Xie? Other than Yanjiao's Xiao Xian, Ji Shou made a mental note of the second dangerous person. Whoosh! Shouts came from other parts of the royal city. However, it wasn't because someone was causing trouble. The purple aura above the royal city was beginning to change. It was retracting like fog. In the palace, the signing ceremony for the heaven and earth contract was about to end. Chapter 834. When Xiao Xian walked out of the garden after signing the contract, the others were silent, especially the heads of the noble families. They looked at Xiao Xian strangely with complicated emotions. However, Ji Fang was the same as before. He chatted with Xiao Xian about old stories in Royal City. At least on the surface, there was nothing out of the ordinary. Xiao Xian only heard about the large-scale brawl on Royal City's busiest street after he came out. However, they weren't the ones who attacked first. Logically speaking, the gambling house and Chang'e were the ones at fault. Therefore, Ji Fang didn't hesitate to discuss with Xiao Xian how to deal with this. It didn't seem unreasonable. However, Gigu and the others knew that if Yanjiao wasn't strong enough and didn't have a special person like Xiao Xian, the royal city wouldn't be so polite to them. The strange phenomenon when the heaven and earth contract was signed was enough to make the people of Royal City wary. Even if they didn't know what Xiao Xian left behind, they could guess based on Ji Fang and the Five Heads' reactions. Xiao Xian was the key to their change of attitude. Yanjiao's Grand Elder was indeed different from the rest. They rejoiced that Xiao Xian was Yanjiao. If Xiao Xian wasn't from Yanjiao and was born in another tribe, Yanjiao would probably be in a different situation now. The farce on the street ended with the Yanjiao people taking their belongings back to where they were settled and the gambling house paying for all the losses. Many people in Royal City were surprised that the Ji family let the tribesmen off so easily. Many times, things couldn't be avoided just because you were in the right. However, this time, the Ji family and the other 5 noble families of Royal City all had the same attitude. This made people think deeply, especially those who were good at conspiracy theories. Their brains spun quickly and thought of many possibilities. Among them, the most active were the caravans. The contract between Royal City and Yanjiao was an equal peace contract. When the time came, travel teams from both sides would be able to cross over. Thinking that the tribe was rich in gems, but there were very few gold mines, the caravan members trembled with excitement as soon as they thought about how great the business opportunity was. This time, without waiting for the Black Bears to say anything, many other trading parties who happened to be in King City rushed to visit the Flaming Horn tribe's settlement. Inside the palace, Xiao Xian had a private chat with Ji Fang after the signing of the contract. Ji Fang brought up Si would like to meet you in the palace. Ji Fang observed Xiao Xian's reaction as he spoke. He thought Xiao Xian would be enraged at the mention of Si, but that was not the case. Sure. Xiao Xian's tone didn't change. His expression was calm as if he wasn't surprised that Ji Fang would mention Si. This confused Ji Fang, but as long as he achieved his goal, it was fine. He arranged a place for Xiao Xian and Si to meet alone. After all, Si was the leader of the largest slave trading organization. It wasn't convenient for him to appear in the palace. In fact, very few people knew about Ji Fang and Xi's partnership. Before Ji Fang seized the throne, other than a few trusted aides, even Ji Shou didn't know about their partnership. Xi Duo's visits to the palace only started after Ji Fang succeeded in seizing the throne. It was also because of the Flaming Horn incident that more people knew about their collaboration. This time, Xi came with a humble attitude and apologized for his attack on the Flaming Horn tribe. Xiao Xian ignored that. It would be strange if Xi was apologetic, more like remorseful. However, it wasn't easy for Xi to put on a low profile. "Just tell me why you're here," Xiao Xian said. Xi's prepared speech was wasted. Still, it was better to get straight to the point. Xi's goal was simple. He wanted Xiao Xian to help him find the chief's bone lock. He used some benefits from one of the robbers in exchange for some information about Robber 7. None of the information was related to Robber 7's whereabouts. This was because robbers rarely revealed their whereabouts to others. Even when they worked together, they would keep some information to themselves. This was a robber's habit. Xi didn't place all his hopes on this information. However, while Robber 7's whereabouts were unknown, he knew some of Robber 7's dark history. For example, Robber 7 had been captured by Yanjiao more than once. More specifically, Robber 7 had suffered at the hands of Yanjiao's Xiao Xian more than once. This was why Xi came to Xiao Xian after Ji Fang mediated. Robber 7's ability to escape was too great. Even the top 3 in the robber family might not be able to catch Robber 7. Although Robber 7's ranking wasn't high, he was getting harder to deal with. Even if they found him, they wouldn't be able to catch him. Bai isn't the only slave trading organization. Just because we don't attack Flaming River doesn't mean others won't. However, if you can help me find the chief's bone lock, I'm willing to sacrifice some benefits for them to avoid Flaming River Alliance's territory, said Xi. Yanjiao can do that too, replied Xiao Xian. But it'll still cause a lot of trouble. I think Yanjiao doesn't want people to go missing in the next few years, or even decades, continued Xi. With Xi's help, it would save a lot of manpower and time. What Yanjiao lacked right now was manpower and time. Everyone knew that the contract with Royal City was only a temporary truce. Once the contract expired, there would be an unavoidable conflict. The Yi family's divination was unpredictable. Who could accurately predict the future? Any small change could lead to a completely different outcome. The safest way was to develop oneself. Only when one was strong enough would they have enough capital to negotiate and solve all problems. If they diverted manpower and time to deal with those problems, the development of the Flaming River region would definitely slow down. With Xi's promise, even if it couldn't solve all the problems, it would be worth it to solve a part of it. However, Xiao Xian didn't answer immediately. After a moment of silence, he said, "Deal." With Xiao Xian agreeing to help, Xi sighed in relief. At least there was still a high chance of getting the chief's bone lock back. On his way out, Xi suddenly paused at the door and turned to ask, "I heard that you know the Yi family's divination skills. Did you predict that I would come looking for you again because of the chief's bone malak? What do you think?" "I think so." Motherf ** Kur Yanjiao. Xi cursed internally. He didn't look at Xiao Xian anymore and walked out. What a shame. His Bai was cut off, his bone lock was stolen, he was chased everywhere and now he had to beg for help. He accepted his defeat at the hands of Xiao Xian, but from now on, he would have to be more careful when it came to Yanjiao. The banquet at the palace was sumptuous, but Ji Fang didn't talk about sparring. Xiao Xian wasn't interested in sparring either. He was distracted. Xiao Xian's absent-mindedness was noticed by everyone, but no one reminded him. Because of the strange phenomenon during the signing of the contract, everyone in the royal city couldn't wait for Yanjiao to leave. They were very curious about these things, but they also knew that they wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. At the beginning of the banquet, some people tried to ask him about it, but Xiao Xian didn't answer. The other flaming horns didn't say much either. Gigu and the others didn't know much about the founder shaman seal, but they wouldn't reveal even the tiniest bit. Xiao Xian also saw Ji-ju at the banquet. Compared to the last time he saw Ji-ju, Ji-ju looked even older now. Under normal circumstances, this shouldn't be the case. The Ji family had a long lifespan and Ji-ju had the medicinal crops from the farm and the 1,000-grain gold. He shouldn't have aged so much. But considering what had happened in the past few years, it was understandable that Ji-ju had become like this. The past few years hadn't been peaceful. Large amounts of crops had died in the disaster, Yi Xiang's revenge, the change in the throne, the Yi family's upheaval, and so on had been very torturous. Especially the first one, the farm that Ji-ju had always cared about. It had suffered heavy losses in the disaster. Many of the crops that had been carefully cared for and had high hopes for had all died. The reorganization after the cataclysm was also very exhausting. Many things had to be personally supervised by Ji-ju, which was very tiring. If there was anyone in the Ji family that Yanjiao liked, it would be Ji-ju. Other than the 1,000-grain gold, most of the popular crops in Yanjiao had been given to them by Ji-ju. Ji-ju sighed when he saw Xiao Xian again. Years ago, when the late king had decided to kill Yanjiao, Ji-ju had gone to the palace to vent his anger. Unfortunately, he hadn't been involved in politics and couldn't interfere. The decision of the royal city's 6 noble families couldn't be changed by him alone. But the one who overthrew the throne wasn't an outsider but a member of the Ji family. It was good that Ji Fang had taken over the throne. At least Ji-ju approved of Ji Fang's decision to sign a peace treaty with Yanjiao. No matter what others said about Yanjiao, Ji-ju had his own judgment. Ji-ju thought that a tribe that could grow good grains was definitely worth making friends with. Ji-ju was very happy to see Xiao Xian again. After the banquet, he even invited Xiao Xian to the farm for a chat. Xiao Xian didn't refuse. He felt that Ji-ju must have other matters to discuss with him at this late hour. He let Gigu and the rest go back to check on the others. Xiao Xian followed Ji-ju out of the city to the farm. Gigu and the rest went directly to Yanjiao's place. Although they'd received reports that everything was fine, as the leader, Gigu was still worried. After all, this was royal city territory. He had to see for himself. Also, Xiao Xian had whispered to him about his decision before leaving. Gigu was also concerned. Things didn't look good. Xiao Xian followed Ji-ju to the farm. Ji-ju couldn't wait to ask if the seeds he'd given him had been planted and how they were growing. When he heard that the seeds were growing well and that the field had expanded, the 1,000-grain gold situation was under control, Ji-ju smiled from the bottom of his heart. He stuffed more seeds into Xiao Xian's hands and told him what kind of crops they were and what to pay attention to when planting them. He told Xiao Xian everything. After Xiao Xian noted it down, Ji-ju paused and said, "Actually, there's another reason I called you here tonight. An old friend wants to see you but he can't move around." Chapter 835. Ji-ju told Xiao Xian about this person's background. It was up to Xiao Xian to decide whether to meet him or not. Ji-ju's old friend was a member of the Yi family. His name was Yi Jie and he was Yi Zong's grandfather. After the Yi family's incident, Yi Jie was seriously injured in the internal conflict and was brought over by Ji-ju to recuperate. Otherwise, Yi Jie would have died if he had stayed in the Yi family. After bringing Xiao Xian to a corner, Ji-ju opened the door and saw an old man with white hair lying on a bed. He did not look well and his body was weak. His breathing was weak. Seeing Xiao Xian come over, Yi Jie sat up with difficulty. Just the act of sitting up took a lot of energy. Xiao Xian looked at Yi Jie's expression. He did not see any hatred in his eyes, only curiosity. As if he saw Xiao Xian's confusion, Yi Jie forced a smile. His body was injured from the internal conflict and his smile was ugly. Moreover, Facing Xiao Xian, Yi Jie's emotions were already complicated and his expression was even more strange. Yi Zong had died in Yanjiao. Xiao Xian had played a part in Yi Qi's death. However, the main reason was that Yi Xiang and the Yi family were not as powerful. If not for Xiao Xian, more members of the Yi family would have died at Yi Xiang's hands. I just want to ask about Yi Zong, Yi Jie spoke slowly and with difficulty. His voice was not loud, but his words were clear enough for Xiao Xian to hear. Xiao Xian had come over because of Ji Ju. Yi Jie had helped Ji Ju many times, especially when it came to finding crop. Yi Jie had helped Ji Ju a lot and had a good relationship with Ji Ju. However, Xiao Xian did not expect Yi Jie to mention Yi Zong so calmly. Although surprised, Xiao Xian still told him about Yi Zong's situation at that time, starting from when Yi Zong agreed to go to Yanjiao as a captive, and then the deal with Yi Zong. Yi Zong could be considered to have committed suicide. He could have survived, but he chose such a method. Yi Jie listened to Xiao Xian's story with his eyes closed, hiding all his emotions. When Xiao Xian finished, he opened his eyes again. His eyes had calmed down. Slowly taking a few deep breaths, Yi Jie said, "Did you do any divination when you came to the royal city?" Xiao Xian looked at him in surprise but did not deny it. "Yes." "How is it?" After a pause, Xian realized that his question was a little vague, so he added, "It's about the result of the return journey." "I didn't find anything." "Did the divination fail? Or did it succeed but there was no result?" Yi Jie asked again. "The latter. Even if the knot was successfully knotted, the knot did not have any meaning. It was like gibberish." Now that the power of divination had increased greatly, Xiao Xian could even divine Robber Seven's location, but he could not divine anything about the return journey. Xiao Xian had been wondering about this for a long time. He also felt that something was amiss, but he could not find the answer. Before they came, the knot did not reveal any danger beyond their ability, but now, the return journey was getting closer and closer, and the results were still the same. This was different from Xiao Xian's intuition. Xiao Xian's intuition told him that there was danger, and between intuition and knots, he trusted his intuition more. His intuition helped him avoid all the life-threatening dangers he had experienced since he was young. Divination was a skill he learned from other tribes, and the Yi family was better at it than he was. This was also why Xiao Xian did not want to stay in the royal city for long. His original plan was to let the people of the Flaming River Valley take a good look at the royal city. It would be beneficial for the development of the Flaming River Valley in the future. Since he was ambitious, his vision could not be limited to this small place. Only by recognizing himself could he go further. Overestimating himself would only lead to faster destruction. However, after coming here, the increasing uneasiness made Xiao Xian change his mind. During the banquet, he told Gigu and the others to return straight away instead of taking them to see the famous golden grain field. He wanted them to go back and prepare. They might have to leave early. The unknown is the most dangerous. Be careful on this trip. Yi Jie stared into Xiao Xian's eyes, emphasizing every word. Only the Yi family can change the results of the divination. But now, there was no one in the royal city who could do such a thing from the Yi family. Yi Xiang of the desert. Xiao Xian immediately recognized this name. Actually, when he had a hunch that the return trip would not be smooth, he had already thought of many possibilities, including how to deal with Yi Xiang. Now, Yi Jie's words confirmed that the danger this time came from Yi Xiang. What could be done had been done. Yi Jie could not help much. He did not find anything useful either, but as a member of the main branch of the Yi family, he knew more. He knew that someone might be deliberately interfering with the divination. That child is called Yi Su? Good, very good. Yi Jie had tears in his eyes, but he did not say anything else. Knowing that Yi Su was living well in Yanjiao was enough. It was not that he was satisfied, but because he was a member of the Yi family. Even if he could not perform a divination now, he could deduce more based on Xiao Xian's words. Without asking, he could deduce Yi Su's current situation. Thus, the purpose of this meeting would be accomplished. Xiao Xian knew that Yi Jie had said everything he wanted to say to him, mainly because of Yi Su. Xiao Xian did not stay long. He planned to return to Yanjiao that very night to check on the situation. Ji Ju did not force him. He sent someone to escort him into the city. The city gates were already closed. Without Ji Ju's escort, Xiao Xian might not be able to enter easily. After Xiao Xian left, Ji Ju thought for a moment, then asked Yi Jie, "You really don't mind Yi Zong's death?" Ji Ju knew how much Yi Jie cared about Yi Zong. In fact, the Yi family did not care as much about blood ties as other tribes. Among the many grandchildren, Yi Zong was valued by Yi Jie because of Yi Zong's talent. Yi Zong was raised by Yi Jie, and he had high hopes for him. Yi Jie had even thought of letting Yi Zong fight for the position of head of the family in the future. However, Yi Zong's death made people sigh. It also made some of the younger members of the Yi family secretly happy. They had one less competitor. The person who had always been above them had finally kicked the bucket. Very few people knew that Yi Zong had taken his son out of the family and placed him in Yanjiao. Yi Jie only found out about Yi Zong's arrangement later. At first, he did not understand why Yi Zong would do that. After calming down and thinking about it, he figured it out and it became clearer and clearer. It would be a lie to say that I don't mind. However, in comparison, I agree with Yi Zong's decision. If it were me, I would have done the same, said Yi Jie. He had only seen his great-grandson briefly since birth. In terms of feelings, he naturally could not compare to Yi Zong, who he had raised himself. However, as Yi Jie thought about it, one emotion replaced all other feelings of hatred, anger, and regret. Why? Ji Ju did not understand. Yi Zong could have survived. If he had been there, Yi Su would have had someone to protect him in Yanjiao. As long as he was alive, he would have had a chance to return to Royal City. For example, this time, during the contract trip between Royal City and Yanjiao, if Yi Zong had been there, he could have made a deal with Yanjiao. With Yi Zong's ability, it would not have been difficult for him to do this. You don't understand, said Yi Jie softly. Yi Jie whispered, I heard that when the flaming horns raise beasts, they look for beasts that are separated from their tribe. They don't have a mother. The earlier they leave the tribe, the better. That way, the tribe will trust them and get closer to them. This analogy, Ji Ju thought to himself, who would compare their great-grandson to an animal? Yi Jie did not think much of it. As long as he could use the simplest way to make Ji Ju understand the reason, it was fine. After drinking a bowl of medicine, Yi Jie said, You know how talented Yi Zong is. When the late king sent troops to kill Yanjiao, Yi Zong followed. When he came back, he encountered a bottleneck. Back then, I did not understand why Yi Zong would encounter such a situation. But now I know the reason. He sighed. It was unclear whether he felt pity for Yi Zong or regret. After a moment of silence, Yi Jie continued, The ancestor of the Yi family is the closest person to the witch ancestor. Xiao Xian is not the witch ancestor, but he is definitely related to the witch ancestor. Yi Su stayed close to Xiao Xian, so he must have his own opportunity. And this opportunity will change the future of the Yi family. That is, the hope of the Yi family's rise. Yi Su. I really want to see him. I have to endure until the day Yi Su returns to the Yi family. Yi Jie's eyes flashed with madness. If something happened to Xiao Xian, then all his hopes would be shattered. Yi Su would not be the Yi Su he had hoped for. All his predictions were based on Xiao Xian's safe return to Flaming River. That was why Yi Jie had used up all his divination when he was heavily injured. That was why today's meeting had taken place. Yi Jie's condition was not good. He had even used up all his divination when he was heavily injured. Ji-ju thought Ijie was seeking death and might not last long. But looking at Ijie's condition now, Ijie's will to live was still very strong. Ji-ju shook his head at Ijie's agitated growl. No one was crazier than the Yi family. In the palace, Ji-shou told Ji-fang about what happened on the streets today in detail. He emphasized Gan Xie. Other than Xiao Xian, he was the second person he felt threatened by. The Yanjiao people and the Flaming River people work well together. Ji-shou had to admit this. He was envious because the 6 divisions of the royal city had worked well together when the city was first built. But as time passed, their differences grew and conflicts continued. The Yi family's fate was a good example. Yes, they work well together. As long as Xiao Xian is here, they will continue to expand, said Ji Fang. Why does Xiao Xian have to exist? Ji Shou was depressed. Indeed, why does Yanjiao have to have Xiao Xian? Ji Fang agreed, then smiled. Whether Yanjiao has such a person in the future depends on whether they can return safely this time. They had signed a contract, but if they did not attack Yanjiao, would there not be anyone else? For example, a certain person in the desert. After signing a contract with Yanjiao, Ji Fang planned to work with Yanjiao to guard against the desert. It would be best if both sides suffered. Chapter 836. Yanjiao stayed in the royal city for 3 days. Even though Xiao Xian wanted to leave as soon as possible, the team still needed time to rest. If they didn't travel in good condition, they might be delayed and suffer more losses. However, they didn't slack off during these 3 days. They went shopping and received guests. More and more caravans came over to curry favor. For now, Yanjiao only signed an agreement with the Black Bear caravan. This agreement involved the Flaming River tribe, the Longboat tribe, and the Black Bear caravan. It was beneficial to all 3 parties. As for the other caravans, Yanjiao didn't know much about them. They would have to wait and see how these caravans perform. Yanjiao's trip to the royal city also meant that the sea route was officially opened. In the future, more and more caravans would use the sea route to travel to the other side. Other than the chaos on the streets that day, many people in the royal city welcomed the tribesmen from the Flaming River tribe. This was because the tribesmen had a lot of good goods. Everyone was satisfied with the trade. The tribesmen got what they wanted, and the merchants in the royal city also got their gems at satisfactory prices. The people in the royal city were very prideful, so they didn't lack ornaments. Rare gems were undoubtedly a symbol of status. This time, there were more gems flowing into the royal city than before. Soon, people on the streets could see the gems around their necks and fingers. It was as if they had become rich overnight. The tribesmen were also very satisfied with the rewards they received from this trip. Not only were they rewarded with material goods, but they also received many important experiences. The gemstones they paid were only a small portion of what they had. Take the crystal in Abuli's hand for example. In the drumming tribe, a crystal like that wasn't much, but it was able to cause a stir here, just like how metal weapons shocked the tribe back then. No one could say for sure whether this exchange would speed up destruction or development. Who was smart and who was stupid? Who would gain the most benefits? No one could say for sure. Time would prove everything. 3 days later, the Flaming River tribe's team left the royal city. Looking at the 3 flags in the distance, the merchants in the royal city were reluctant to part with them. If there were no more gems to earn, of course, he would be reluctant. Their impression of the other continent was limited to the Flaming River basin and Yanjiao, as well as the longboat that could travel by sea. As for the other tribes, they didn't have much of a presence here. The caravans were already getting restless. The Black Bears were also preparing for their first trip across the sea. What was surprising was that the 6 aristocrats of the royal city were unusually quiet. They did not move for a long time, as if they were waiting for something. while the Yanjiao team was making their way back, somewhere far away from the coast and the royal city, in a forest on a mountain. Robber 7 was sleeping on a thick tree branch. After stealing the chief's bone lock from Yanjiao, Robber 7 had avoided Yanjiao's team and hid here. Before this, he had spread the news to the rest of the robbers, letting them know that he, Robber 7, had stolen C's chief's bone lock again. Robber 7 was waiting for Yanjiao to leave before he came out to stir up trouble. By then, he wouldn't have to worry about anything. Other than Xiao Xian, Robber 7 wasn't afraid of anyone. Although Gan Xie gave him a dangerous feeling, Robber 7 believed that if he could avoid him once, he could do it again. Gan Xie was nothing, Robber 7 thought. With that in mind, Robber 7 lived a peaceful life. Every day, he would hide in the forest and sleep, counting the time in boredom. An eagle's cry jolted Robber 7 out of his reverie. He knew all the birds that frequented the mountains, but the eagle's cry didn't belong to any of the species that would normally appear in the mountains. Moreover, this eagle's cry was familiar to Robber 7. He thought of the eagle from the Flaming Horn tribe, but he didn't think it was possible. He had already hidden so far away, how could he still hear it? Cautiously, Robber 7 flipped open the branches above him and observed the situation in the sky through the small gaps between the leaves. An eagle was circling in the sky. The other birds on the mountain avoided it, and the wild beasts hid as well, afraid of being targeted. Against a high-level predator, they could only hide to save their lives. The surroundings quieted down, with only the occasional echo of the eagle's cry. The eagle in the sky flew lower. It was much larger than an ordinary eagle, and with the pattern of its feathers and the cry, Robber 7 no longer held on to any hope. It's really that eagle. Why is it here? If this eagle is here, then where is Xiao Xian? Is Xiao Xian here too? Robber 7 panicked. He could feel his bones aching all over. He didn't dare to imagine what would happen if he was caught again. The last time he escaped, it was because C appeared with his men and held Xiao Xian back. This time, no one else came to distract him. Was he in for it? Soon enough, Robber 7 realized that there was no one else on the eagle's back. But that didn't mean that no one else would appear. Robber 7 didn't dare to move. He quickly treated himself as a tree rooted in the forest, blending in with the surroundings. He didn't even notice the bug bite. His eyes were fixed on the sky, and at the same time, he paid attention to any movements around him. The eagle in the sky circled around the mountain. After a few more rounds, Robber 7 saw that the eagle in the sky had dropped something on the ground. It fell into the forest. Robber 7 looked at the eagle in the sky again. It didn't fly down to the ground to investigate. Instead, it circled around and left. Robber 7 waited patiently for half a day, but he didn't notice any other movements. Moreover, the surroundings were starting to regain their vitality. The birds and beasts that were hiding were starting to come out. The eagle had left, and there weren't any strangers or beasts nearby. Robber 7 didn't notice anything. When the sun was about to set, Robber 7 couldn't hold back his curiosity. He carefully crept towards the place where the object fell. Finally, he found it on a tree. It was a bamboo tube with 2 words written on it, Robber 7. When he saw the 2 words, Robber 7's heart skipped a beat. His instincts told him that it wasn't anything good. But he was even more curious. Why would the eagle drop this bamboo tube here? Was it a coincidence, or was it intentional? After some hesitation, Robber 7 couldn't hold back his curiosity. He went over to the tree and took down the bamboo tube. He twisted it open. Inside the bamboo tube was a scroll made of animal skin. There were words written on it. Robber 7 was like a statue. His body was stiff as he stared at the words on the scroll. The more he looked, the paler his face became. It was as if he was frightened, and as if he was discouraged. Bam! Robber 7 slammed the scroll on the ground. His face turned from pale to red as he panted heavily. The words on the scroll were written by Xiao Xian. He wanted Robber 7 to deliver the item to Yanjiao himself. It didn't say what would happen if Robber 7 didn't do it. But the more Robber 7 thought about it, the more he felt lucky. No one in the Robber clan knew of Robber 7's whereabouts, and no one from Bai could find him no matter how hard they tried. However, the eagle had left a scroll here. It was just an ordinary scroll, but to Robber 7, it was like a bomb. He couldn't recover from it for a few days. Regardless of Robber 7's decision after receiving the scroll, Yanjiao's team continued with their original plan. Unlike when they came, the cities they passed by on their way back were no longer on full alert. They even opened their gates to welcome them. They hoped that Yanjiao's team could stay in their cities for a long time. Some caravans that didn't make it to the royal city tried to approach Yanjiao to talk about cooperation. The news of the peace treaty had already spread to other cities. Then, the traveling teams would spread the news to even further places. A new situation was about to unfold. Some saw danger, while others saw opportunity. Whether or not they could seize it depended on their own abilities. The reputation of the Longboat tribe's fleet had already spread far and wide. Mu Fa had already received several requests for cooperation. Thinking back to the time when he brought his team here, they were ostracized by many parties and it was difficult for them to move forward. Now the tables had turned. As long as the longboats did not court death, they would prosper soon. After the team returned to the place where they disembarked, they waited for a few days for Cha-Cha to return. This time, the people of the Longboat tribe and the other tribes were relaxed. Their ambitions were also growing. If the gap between the two sides was too big, they wouldn't have the courage to think about surpassing the other side. But now they realized that the other side wasn't as scary as the rumors said. But soon, they noticed that the people of Yanjiao were unusually quiet. Ever since they left the royal city, they had been on high alert. They were even more alert than before. Did something happen? Mu Fa asked, remembering that Xiao Xian had the ability to perform divination. I don't know, but it's better to be cautious, Gigu replied. Xiao Xian stood alone at the bow of the ship, looking at the boundless sea in front of him. They were already far away from the mainland. They couldn't see the mainland, but the feeling of uneasiness was getting stronger. Something was definitely about to happen. The knots were the same as before. The knots were meaningless. Xiao Xian didn't expect to use it to perform divination. He just quietly sensed his surroundings. The weather was good today. The sky was clear and blue. Only where the sea met the sky were there some shadows of white cloud. The wind wasn't strong. Before they went out to sea, the people of the longboat had said that there would be continuous good weather. There wouldn't be any storms for a while, but the weather at sea was ever-changing. They still had to be careful. Until now, Xiao Xian hadn't heard from the people of the Longboat tribe that there was going to be a storm. There were some slight changes in the sea current, but the people of the Longboat said it wasn't a big problem. Then, what was the hidden danger? Xiao Xian stared into the distance, lost in thought. Suddenly, a huge shadow rushed over. He couldn't see its face clearly, but its huge size was enough to shock Xiao Xian. It was similar to the giant crocodile Xiao Xian had seen before. It was comparable to the largest giant eagles at Eagle Mountain. Not to mention the largest ship in the fleet, even the combined size of the entire fleet couldn't compare to this thing. Formless pressure and killing intent, like a sudden tsunami, rushed directly at him. Xiao Xian took a deep breath. When he looked again, he found that the sea was still calm. There was only the sound of laughter and the sound of the waves hitting the ship. But Xiao Xian knew that it wasn't an illusion. It was an omen. It's coming, Xiao Xian said in a low voice. What? Mu Fa, who came to find Xiao Xian, heard this and hurriedly took out a telescope to look at the sea. He didn't find anything suspicious. The weather was also within their expectations, so he didn't understand what Xiao Xian meant by, "It's coming." What's coming? Gigu and the others also hurried over. They knew that Xiao Xian wouldn't say this for no reason. Since Xiao Xian said, "It's coming," something must be happening, and it couldn't be good. "What's the plan?" Gigu asked. "I'll lure him away. You guys go first." Xiao Xian said, "His target is me. We can't fight him head-on the sea. You won't win either. I'll lure him away. You guys continue with the original plan. Keep an eye on Caesar. It can sense danger before you. It can see things that you can't see." Xiao Xian had always thought that Yixiang would deal with him on land. After all, Yixiang liked places without water. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lived in the desert. Yixiang's puppets were all dehydrated and preferred dry places. For example, Ganqie. Even though he had changed a lot of his habits, he still didn't like places with water. He didn't like to leave the cabin when he was at sea. The corpse-like puppets in the desert should be the same. Xiao Xian had been on guard when they were heading to the royal city. He had also made preparations on the way from the royal city to the coast. But in the end they met at sea. There were too many restrictions on the sea. With Yixiang's abilities, even if they won, they would suffer great losses. Besides, with others around, Xiao Xian's hands would be tied. In that case, it was better for him to lure Yixiang away and let the fleet return first. Xiao Xian leaped onto the eagle's back and reminded Gigu and Mu Fa, "Be careful in the sea. You don't have to be wary of people." Xiao Xian rode the eagle into the air. He had to choose a direction, but he couldn't just pick it randomly. Which direction should they fly? At times like this, Xiao Xian trusted his instincts more. "That way, fly higher," Xiao Xian said to Cha-Cha. Gigu and the others saw Xiao Xian leave on the eagle. "That direction. Is he going to settle it on land?" Mu Fa said. The further they went in that direction, the closer the two continents were to each other. The place closest to each other was the place where Rock Hill City and the nobles fought a long war. When Gui he heard Mu Fa's words, he agreed. There were too many restrictions on the sea. On land, even in the desert, it was better than in the sea. But reality was not what they thought it was. When Xiao Xian made his choice, his first thought was not Mu Fa's guess. He felt that there was a chance of survival there. It was a gut feeling. Secondly, Xiao Xian thought of all sorts of ways to deal with Yixiang. It would be best if they could get on land earlier, to the desert or somewhere else. Chapter 837. As soon as Xiao Xian left, Gigu, Mu Fa, and the others were still discussing what kind of danger they might encounter when they heard Caesar growling. He looked very anxious, as if he felt that some kind of danger was approaching. Thinking of what Xiao Xian said before he left, they stopped discussing and hurriedly paid attention to the situation around them. Caesar's reaction meant that he had discovered something. "Caesar, what's the matter?" Gigu observed Caesar's every movement. He noticed that Caesar was growling anxiously, sometimes facing the sea, sometimes looking down. When he was facing the sea, he didn't have a fixed direction, but he was growling down. Does this mean that there's something under the ship or in the sea? Xiao Xian had warned them that they didn't necessarily have to be on guard against people. Then, could it be a sea beast? Mu Fa blew the emergency alert whistle, and the atmosphere in the fleet suddenly became tense. Caesar's growling grew louder and more anxious, as if he was afraid of something. When they were hunting in the forest, Caesar didn't show any signs of fear even when he encountered some ferocious beasts that were difficult to deal with. But now Gui he and the others' hearts sank. They were afraid that the trouble was bigger than they thought. Mu Fa took out his binoculars and observed the surrounding sea. He didn't see anything that could pose a threat to them, but, twitching his nose, Mu Fa asked, "Do you guys smell something?" "It's a little stinky," Gigu said. Previously, he thought it was an illusion, or maybe it was because someone in the fleet didn't clean up after killing the fish. But now, the stench was getting stronger and stronger. It was obviously different from the food debris on the ship. The smell was pungent. "It smells like rotten fish," a warrior of the longboat tribe said, looking at the net in his hand that he had just pulled up. Just now, he and a few others worked together to cast the net to catch fish. Now, they didn't catch many fish, but they found a lot of strange fragments. "What's that?" Mu-Fa frowned and went over to look at the things in the net. "I don't know." The warrior who was pulling the net took a whiff and leaned back with a twisted face. "It stinks." To people who were not used to the stench, the smell was disgusting. The people on the long boat could still bear it, but the others couldn't. "What the hell is this? Hurry up and throw it away," someone said while pinching his nose. The soldiers pulling the net were about to throw the smelly pieces into the sea, but Mu-Fa stopped them. When they were sailing, they would sometimes face a shortage of food, but even if they were hungry, they would not eat the dead fish in the sea. After eating some of the dead fish, with their physique as totem warriors, they could still bear it. But some fish, when rotting, would produce a terrible stench, and at the same time, it was highly toxic. Even powerful totem warriors could not resist it. However, their understanding of the sea was limited. They could not tell which fish were edible and which were not. But after so many voyages, they found that most of the fish were inedible. So, in the fleet, Mu-Fa simply did not let anyone touch the rotting fish. Now, in front of them, these rotting pieces of meat that were pulled up by the net should have fallen from some kind of sea beast in the sea. It should be a big guy. Mu-Fa held his breath and used a metal stick to poke at the pieces of meat. After observing, he came to a conclusion. "There are dead sea beasts in the sea. Chief, look." The warrior standing on the edge of the boat was shocked. "What?" Gigu strode to the edge of the boat and looked at the sea. He was also shocked. On the sea surface, there were many similar rotting pieces of meat floating up from the water. The surrounding area was shrouded in a strong stench. Not only them, but a large area on the sea surface was the same. Those rotting pieces of meat of different sizes rose and fell on the sea surface. It was a horrifying sight. "Something is wrong with the current." An old warrior of the longboat tribe frowned. There was always a reason for all changes, but they couldn't find a suitable reason to explain this phenomenon. Observing the movement of these currents, they felt more like there was a huge object moving under the water. Fortunately, the place with the most rotting meat was not here, but a little further away. Caesar's low growl became more intense. The hair all over his body stood up like steel needles. The third eye in the middle of his forehead was wide open, but his pupils were contracted. This was a reaction when facing a stronger creature. Creak, the boat began to shake. Waves suddenly appeared on the sea surface. However, the wind at this time was not strong enough to cause such waves. "There's something under the sea. Be careful." The crew of the longboat tribe were busy controlling the boat. They were afraid that if they were not careful, they would be overturned by the waves. There were bigger waves in the distance. They rose and were broken by another current. The seawater was stirred up, and the stench became more pungent. But at this time, no one cared about it. They all stared nervously at the sea surface. Hua! The waves rose, and a huge broken tail broke the surface of the sea. It made a circle in the air, and then smashed into the sea again. The waves caused the fleet to shake violently. If it were not for the experienced crew of the longboat tribe controlling the boat, there would have been a boat overturned by the waves. They were so far away, and if they were closer, what kind of impact would they suffer? They did not dare to imagine. The stinky waves hit the boat, and there were pieces of rotting meat of different sizes in the waves. The deck was full of stinky seawater and the pieces of rotting meat that smashed over. In the distance, a huge figure broke the surface of the sea, and part of it was exposed. It turned in a circle, and then plunged back into the sea. They could not see its specific appearance, but the people of the fleet could clearly remember its huge size. Only a part of it was exposed, and it was already so huge. Then, how big was the whole sea beast? The most shocking thing was that there was more than one such sea beast. Farther away from the fleet, there were many other huge figures. What is that? Why are there so many sea beasts? I've never seen them on the sea before. Those sea beasts are a little strange, like. The longboat tribe member stammered as he looked at the sea. He was so shocked that he could not speak. Death Aura, Gonchie said as he looked at the sea. You mean? Mu Fa looked at Gonchie in shock, waiting for an explanation. They're all dead, Gonchie said concisely. You mean none of those huge sea beasts were alive? Some people did not understand. If they were dead, why could they still move? But on second thought, there were many puppets made from corpses in the desert. But what they did not understand was that there were only a few of them. But now there were huge sea beasts on the sea. They could even control dead sea beasts. It was a sunny day, but everyone felt a chill run down their spine. It was as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over their heads. If all the sea beasts that appeared in the distance were to attack them, would they still be able to survive? This was the sea. Look, they're leaving. Someone shouted excitedly. The others also looked over when they heard the voice. They discovered that the sea beasts that had stirred up the sea surface and had yet to reveal themselves were indeed moving away from them. But that's the direction Xiao Xian left. Mu Fa exclaimed. So this is the trouble Xiao Xian mentioned? Their target should be Xiao Xian, said the Mang tribesman. If Xiao Xian had not left and was still on the ship, would those sea beasts have attacked their fleet? If those sea beasts had really attacked the fleet, what were their chances of survival? Mu Fa did not dare to think about it. The result would have been disappointing. On the other hand, after Xiao Xian left the fleet, he noticed that there were rotting beast carcasses on the sea. Some even had bones sticking out of them. Yixiang could even enslave these sea beasts. The sea beasts that appeared all had the same target, Xiao Xian, who was flying in the air. Many of the sea beasts that appeared from all directions had been living in the deep sea and rarely appeared on the surface. Their lives were long over, but today, they were once again exposed to Yang Guang. Xiao Xian did not know how many sea beasts of this size Yixiang could enslave. He was glad that he left the fleet early. Looking at the sea beasts that were only partially exposed, Xiao Xian patted Cha-Cha. Keep going. Cha-Cha was much faster than the sea beast. Xiao Xian didn't know how fast the sea beasts were when they were alive, but now, the enslaved sea beasts were far slower than Cha-Cha. The beast horde was gradually left behind. Xiao Xian continued to fly according to his original plan. He could first find a safe place to hide from this attack. However, even if he avoided this attack, there would be a next time, and a time after that. Xiao Xian had a feeling that if he avoided Yixiang's attack this time, he would have to pay a greater price the next time. Since he could not avoid it, he had to face it head-on. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.